right. Good Friday, everybody. I am excited to be here and joined by my colleagues. We will be taking opening remarks, so President Flynn and Councillor Bach, just so you know. For the record, my name is Julia Mejia, City Councilor at Large. I am the chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on Labor, Workforce, and Economic Development. This public hearing is being recorded and it is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcasted on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, Files Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.labor@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing, or I may bring you on in the middle of it. So just get ready if you're here to sign up. Please make sure that if you're here in the chamber, you sign up at the sheet near the door. If you are looking to testify virtually, please email Cora, MONTROND @boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on Docket 0153, order for a hearing regarding the biannual review of the Boston Employment Commission and Boston Residents' Jobs Policy. This matter was sponsored by my colleagues, Councilor Ruth Louis-Jean at Large, Tanya Anderson, District 7, and Brian Worrell, District 4, and was referred to the Committee on Labor, Workforce, and Economic Development on January 11th, 2023. We have I am joined by my colleagues here in order of arrival, President Flynn of District 2 and Councilor Bach of District 8. I believe that is all. We are joined today by the administration panel, which consists of Trin Nguyen, who is the Chief of Worker Empowerment, who can only be here for the first hour, y'all. So we'll make sure that we get our questions to you first. Andre Lima, the Director of Development, the Director of the Department of Supplier and Workforce Diversity. Christopher Brown, the Boston Residency Jobs Policy Manager. Jody Sugarman Bronze. Okay. Deputy Chief of Worker Empowerment, Joe Cole J.C. Burton. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, she's here virtually.
Okay, Joe Cole, you will be joining us.
JC.
JC. Oh, it says Joe Cole.
She goes by JC.
Okay. So no, for the record, JC Burton, who is the commissioner and founder of the CEO SRGE Construction Equity Accelerator and president and CEO of Mabin Construction, Inc., who will be joining us virtually. For our community panel, we have Mary Vogel, who is the Executive Director of Building Pathways, Nancy Luck, who's the Deputy Director of Building Pathways, Shantan Green, who's the business agent of the Boston Building Trades Union, Shamira Turner, who's the business rep for Sheet Metal Workers, Local 17, Yasmin Santiago, organizer for the Plumbers and Gas Fitters, Local 12. Opening remarks, I would now like to give my colleagues, starting with the lead sponsor, an opportunity for opening remarks. Councilor Louis-Jean, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for everyone for being with us here this Friday morning for the biannual review of the Boston Residents' Job Policy, which we're required to have under the ordinance, but also just good for us to be checking in to see the progress that we're making on the city level to ensure that our projects here in the city are meeting the goals and the objectives as outlined in the ordinance of hiring Boston residents, of hiring people of color, and of hiring women. This ordinance, we know that there are many advocates who have come before, here, members of this here body, like former City Councilor Chuck Turner, who fought for the inclusion of primarily and initially Black people in industries that really precluded their participation. And we've been chipping away at those barriers at different rates, sometimes not to the pace at which we would like. But we are here to see how we're doing as a city, what we can be doing to strengthen our outcomes. And so I appreciate everyone for being here. As one of the new city councilors, I know that there are folks who have been working on this for decades before me, and I want to respect and honor the work of those who have come before. And am really also excited to be part of this conversation to think about how are we ensuring that our residents have access to good quality jobs that are family sustaining careers, right? Not just jobs, but careers that really can be an entryway into the middle class. The construction industry is a vital component of our city's economy, and it's essential that we have a pipeline of well-qualified workers, especially Boston residents, women, and people of color. We spend our significant tax dollars on municipal construction projects to develop, prepare, and maintain municipal facilities and infrastructure. It's in the interest of all of our residents that we ensure that economic prosperity is shared by everyone, and that these contracts and construction projects flow to our residents in order to promote opportunities for people of color and women. Furthermore, these city-funded construction projects provide an important opportunity to connect with our workforce development programs, training programs, and other opportunities created by the city in partnership with our trade unions to develop the next generation of good-paying jobs and careers for our residents. So I look forward to this hearing and discovering new ways to help fulfill this mission of the BRJP while finding ways to cultivate the future construction workforce. I'm eager to hear how the industry is working to find ways to address the worker shortfalls, creating new approaches and programs to encourage young people to enter the industry, and programs targeting new tradespeople, apprenticeships, and employees from diverse and underrepresented populations. We also know that the Boston Employment Commission, for the first time, took up fining those in violation of the ordinance, and we're looking forward to hearing an update on that. And we know that there's a lot more work to do, and I'm looking forward to hearing about the data that we have and how we can do more and ask more of everyone involved, our developers, our unions, our construction, our GCs, the City of Boston, the City Council, to make sure that we are forever pressing forward on this issue. So thank you, and thank you to everyone for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Louis-Jean. President Flynn, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for sharing this important discussion, and thank you to the sponsors as well. I know this is critical, it's important. We also have to make sure that the enforcement part is followed closely, and that's what's really important in this discussion as well as the enforcement. 1986, I'm just reading one of the whereases. In 1986, Mayor Flynn and the City Council amended the ordinance establishing the Boston Employment Commission to enforce the policy and broaden the scope. So I say that so we can, so there's a plan in place that we're able to recruit, attract, and retain workers of color, women, Boston residents is a critical part. I also want to thank the committee. I also want to thank my colleagues for making sure the community advocates are part of the discussion. I want to thank the administration team. They do a wonderful job. They work hard. They're professional. I want to say thank you to the community advocates that are here, but also here virtually advocating for this important ordinance in the enforcement of it, but also building pathways. They do an outstanding job in our city, helping so many people. And the Boston building trades, organized labor, are a critical part of the success of this policy. They do a tremendous job. Things aren't perfect, but they're working hard, and they're making sure that they're doing their job to help on this critical effort. But I'm glad that they're part of this discussion, because their voice in Boston is important as we move this economy forward. Organized labor is important to the city of Boston. When development takes place, those development dollars are able to support our school buildings, our city workers. So having Boston Building Trades, organized labor present at this conversation is critical. And I'm thankful for my colleagues for ensuring that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councillor Bach?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much to the administration for being with us. I think it's really important that we now have a Chief of Worker Empowerment, so thank you to Chief Twin. And I think there are not actually very many issues on which the City Council has a biannual hearing by law, and I think that really reflects the centrality importance of this. To me, every time that we're building new public goods, new public facilities in the city, it's a cause for excitement. But as Councillor Flynn said, what's really important is that we have, the kind of shared prosperity where the economic benefits of that work are going back to our hardworking families. And so, I think it's really important hitting these targets for Boston residents and people of color and women. I've been really encouraged by some of the progress, both watching the Building Pathways program, which I know we'll hear from, and also going to the Women Build Boston conference last fall, just being aware of how much we have managed to grow the pipeline. But there's obviously a ton of work still to do. And I think the only other thing I want to say is the reason this is important is because these are high quality jobs. So it's really important as we talk about the targets to also make sure that we're upholding high labor standards, because we don't, the point of sharing this wealth is that it's wealth, is that a worker goes to work and they're safe and they, have the opportunity to work in good conditions, and then they get to bring home to their family, money that is actually up to living in Boston, right? And I think we all know that we won't, already the Boston resident number is under pressure because of the expenses of living in the city these days. And so I just really want to emphasize how much it's important both to talk about these proportions, but also to really ensure that these continue to be high quality jobs in the city of Boston. And I want to thank all the partners in organized labor and beyond who have worked so hard to make that true over so many years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. So just really quick, I'll just start with my opening remarks. Thank you everyone for being here. Really excited to dive into the conversation. Of the top 150 projects in the last 5 years of hours by hours worked, less than a third met racial equity goals. None met goals for women, and 3 projects met goals for the city residents, according to the city data. The current goals for residents are set at 50% of the workforce, 40% for people of color, and 12% for women. However, we are averaging at 24% for Boston residents, 37% for people of color, and 8% for women. So we, having a growth mindset, have a lot of work to still do. It seems like our biggest area of concern remains with residents. Today, I would like us to discuss if there has been any enforcement of compliance, and if so, what has that looked like? Recruiting Boston residents for these projects is really important. What kind of outreach are we making to bring in more Boston residents into the trades in particular? What type of collaboration efforts have been made to work with the trades unions? For 3 months, GBH News has been asking the Building Trade Council for data on diversity of union membership, but has not received a response. Transparency and accountability are important components of efforts to promise equity and inclusion in any industry, and stakeholders should work together to ensure that such information is readily available and used to inform ongoing efforts. I would like us to also delve in a little deeper into ensuring that we are receiving the data on diversity so that we can identify areas of improvement, because you don't know what you don't know. I'm really looking forward to discussing how we can be supportive in ensuring that the BRJP goals are met and how the City Council can best support these efforts. And, I would not be who I am if I didn't say it the way I know how, is that, I think it's really important for us to really understand that the best way for us to really get to where we need to be is to do so with vulnerability and honesty. right? So we're going to have to bring into this chamber what are the real issues that are preventing us from reaching these goals. Because otherwise, we're gonna keep having the same conversation, and the only thing that I keep seeing that changes are the characters that are in front of us and maybe the outfits that we're wearing. And that's it. So at some point, right, there has to be a level of accountability that we're ready to lean into. I hear that, the trades are working really hard, and I really do appreciate the efforts that they make. But if you can't afford to live in the city, we're never going to be able to reach that goal, right? So there are some things that they can do, but there are some other things that the city can do, and I'm really looking forward to figuring out how we, as a collective, close that gap. Because otherwise, it's just a whole bunch of, this begins to feel like a procedure. We're mandated to do this, so we show up and do it. And nobody has time for that, right? So we'd like to be able to make sure that we walk out of here today with 3 things that we're going to do differently than what we've done in the past since we've shown up into this chamber. Because I think then, and only then, can we have some level of accountability for ourselves. Is that fair? Can we do that? I mean, let's seize this moment, right? Because we don't got time for this anymore. That's it. So with that, we'll start with our Chief of Worker Empowerment. Trin, you now have the floor.
Hear me okay? Great, thank you. First, I want to say, Madam Chair, thank you for your leadership and your vision and how you operate with the City of Boston and our cabinet, our departments, and that wisdom is so important to our work. Especially as the trustee of the Neighborhoods Jobs Trust, I want to commend you for all the work that you've done with us and for me, so thank you. I want to acknowledge and also thank Councilor Louis June for your leadership and your vision and commitment to the city and for our department and for myself. So thank you for all the work, and we look forward to the partnership. And President Councilor Flynn, for all that you've done and you continue to do and strive. I think 18 years ago, I was the Beck Commissioner, one of the commissioners under Mayor Menino, and served 2 years. 2 terms, actually, 4 years, which seems so long at the time, and now I'm here for 14 years, which seems like long but short. And so I want to thank Mayor Flynn for all the work that he's done, and then for your leadership to carrying on that torch. And then Councilor Bach, congratulations on your role, and we look forward to working with you as we hammer some of these issues that Councilor Mejia have put forth. So we're looking forward. It's hard work. It's going to take a long time. It's a little stressful, no pressure, but we look forward to really seizing this moment as you spoke about. I want to also recognize Darlene Lambros, who's the executive president of the Greater Boston Labor Council, who's always pushing the administration, myself, and our work to do the right thing. And it's not always easy. We're not perfect, but really to be that check and balance for our work. I want to thank you for all your work. Building pathways, of course, have a deep heart for it as we're really designing it and moving forward. There's some exciting times as we're seizing the moments. The work is going to be extremely hard. It's going to challenge our own accountability and where we stand on all sides. It makes me nervous, but I'm ready for the challenge. I have a lot of gray hair. I do have a good hairstylist, so she's going to cover it for me. She swears to me on a cheap price. Mary Vogel, who's my colleague, who's been doing this work for quite some time, knows me inside out and knows how transparent I am to pushing advocacy in racial, gender, sexual orientation, into some of the most conservative areas, and we have that check and balances. And those conversations and those stances have never been easy. So I want to thank Mary Vogel for supporting and hearing where I come from. My colleagues here, Chris, Andrea, and Jody, have been on the forefront doing this line work. You know, it's always easy to talk about policy, set goals and agendas, but they're the ones who are doing the hard work day in and day out, including staff and advocacy groups and stakeholders who are not here. So I want to recognize everyone for being here, and I apologize that my back is to the attendees that are here. My name is Trin Nguyen. I have the pleasure of serving Mayor Wu as the Chief of Worker Empowerment. And we think about worker empowerment in a couple of ways, but for the sake of time, I want to just narrate two. One is that we always talk about workforce development as workers and training workers, upskilling workers, and a variety of things. And we're already trying to do that, and there's a heavy demand on workers as it is. So we need to really balance that equation in that public narrative by bringing employers to the table and asking them to partner with us on good quality jobs for workers. So I'd like to just really make sure that the Worker Empowerment Cabinet makes that balance in the public narrative, that it's workforce development is not just about workers getting trained. It's about employers coming to the table with good paying jobs. And so I really want to really emphasize that point. The second point, thank you, Councilor Flynn. The second point I do want to mention is that you know, workers and worker empowerment thinks about just workers in general, and to do effective compliance, to do job quality, we need employers at the table. And it's not like we don't have good employers. There are some model really good employers that we have, and it's not always perfect, but we can't work without the business community, economic development, and employers coming to the table and doing this work. So I want to acknowledge that our policies, programs in the worker empowerment is about the partnerships that move forward. I am told that these slides work with this remote control, so I want to, I think, it works, okay? It works, thank you. And then just to really talk about, I'm going to give a brief overview of the worker empowerment and then turning it on over to my colleagues. And so we were formed in September of 2022 on Labor Day on the Worker Empowerment Cabinet with a few goals that are laser focused. We do a variety of things, but we want to make sure we make a dent and an impact. And so a few things that we're focusing on is bringing together related roles and functions that were spread across city departments and agencies under one single unified cabinet. There's different labor compliances, different procedures in the city of Boston, doing great things, some not so well. And so centralizing all of that back end so that we can operationalize some of the great policies that are going on. We need to do a better job at making sure that that gets centralized under one cabinet and one department. We want to also work with Mayor Wu, city council members, stakeholders, resident groups, community colleges and workforce partners, and importantly, employers to set future policies and vision for workers with an immediate focus on implementing Boston's Green New Deal, which you've heard many times over. We are really charged with regulating, overseeing, and improving workplace conditions for the health of workers, and we take that very seriously. I mean, as Councilor Mejia spoke about, we just don't have the time nor the energy or the resources just to do surface level policy work. I think press conferences are really important. I think they're transparent, but at the end of the day, what's in it for our community and what do we do for the residents of Boston is really important to us day in and day out. We work and breathe that work. For example, as you all know, we this past Monday, we filed a worker protection zero tolerance for construction workers and the workers of all Boston. And within it, we really battled with ourselves, with our values and our resources to put some teeth into that compliance, which requires a strong collaboration with ISD. So we look forward to partnering with you and passing that ordinance. And you can see the kind of change as we're moving forward with the Wu administration. We do want to expand opportunities for workers through access to quality jobs, skills training, and career pipelines. And I want to reiterate, you can only train workers to death. I mean, like, how much more can you work with workers in building pipelines? At the end of the day, the employers need to come to the table and make a strong hiring commitment to hiring graduates. So, you know, we've done that with scalable projects, which are good, which is the Greater Boston Good Jobs Coalition, which works with employers in the 3 industries: clean energy, healthcare, and childcare, to train primarily Boston residents, BIPOC residents into good-paying jobs. And we were clear what good-paying jobs are. That's to pay family-sustaining wages, employer-sponsor benefits, and upward mobility for workers. So that model can exist. It's 3 years for 4,618 committed jobs from employers. And while we love labor and union jobs, these jobs aren't union jobs, but they have really good standards. So we want to really hold union standards as a parallel, but if we don't, we really have to really push for good quality jobs to make it accessible for the residents of Boston. So we can do it in 3 years and make a commitment with employers for 4,618 jobs. We can do it anywhere, and we need to go to scale because that's not big enough. Some of our major goals includes, as you know, the Green New Deal, which has a $2 billion project to upgrade or renovate every BPS school in the next 10 years. And we're interested in not just the surface level numbers, but we're really digging into the procurement processes and putting employment plans into these procurements with commitments from employers to hire. So that's working with the trades, that's working with union, that's working with community colleges, because we're not just interested in training, but credentialed, credit-bearing training that matriculates into community colleges with competencies so that residents can get into an associate degree jobs as well while they're working with Learn and Earn. We have career pipelines, as you know, we've mentioned, coordinated and build on the work of the city's workforce employment initiatives. We also want to know that and note that Boston is a powerful employer in the city. We're probably the largest employer. So we got to set things by example. We need to hire and train people of color from Boston into these good paying jobs. They've always been historically great paying jobs. We want to focus on construction crucial career pipelines between the city of Boston's educational institutions and jobs. We need to pull in our community colleges. No one can go to scale with this kind of work except community colleges. And so for every $1 that the city puts in either our workforce training, in our tuition-free community college program, we leverage at least $9 to $12 of workforce investment funds or Pell dollars from the feds into the city of Boston. So we need to pull and leverage some of those institutions and larger funding sources into this kind of work. And then last but not least, we want to really focus on the health and safety, using power and scale of this cabinet to drive safe, equitable, empowering labor standards across the board. And Councilor Mejia has spoken truth to that, to those words, which is we're not really just interested in passing surface level ordinances and be speakers that don't hold some concrete impact for residents and neighborhoods of Boston. We really don't have the energy nor the time to do that kind of work moving forward. We never have, but we really can't afford it moving forward. And so within these policy pillars, we've organized 4 units within the cabinets to do this work, which is the youth employment and opportunity. Some of you been to the press conference yesterday. Youth employment jobs and year-round jobs are really important with youth development and career pathways. The second is, of course, many of you know, is the Office of Workforce Development that does R&D and funding a lot of employer-related work, plus workforce training programs that includes Neighborhoods Jobs Trust. And then the third piece is the Center for Working Families, used to be known as Office of Financial Empowerment. We do credit building with mainly low-wage workers and working class families to get them safe banking products and children's savings accounts for colleges for young kids as well. And last but not least, which Jody will talk about further, which is the labor compliance and policy piece. That is it for now from my piece. I just want to let you know that we are working on building more effective labor compliance and workforce training for our cabinet. Looking forward to conversations and partnerships with every single one of you to make this work. We are a cabinet of empowerment, but not just empowerment with us, but empowerment with every stakeholders and residents in the city of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, and good morning. My name's Jody Sugarman-Brozan. I'm the Deputy Chief of Worker Empowerment. Really honored to be in this role. I come to this table with, I've been in the role since the end of October, and I bring about 20 years, maybe more. I think I need your hair salon stylist. Just my gray hair shows it, but with about 20 years of community, environmental, and worker justice work. And I know that as this office inherits the Boston Resident Jobs Policy and brings it into the cabinet, I understand the legacy of the people who fought so hard for this policy, and that is something that's really important as it comes into this office and we take over in ensuring compliance. So the Labor Compliance and Worker Protections Department within the cabinet is basically the central resource for workers, and we use the power and scale of the City of Boston's procurement, contracting, licensing, and permitting to drive safe, equitable, and empowering labor standards for all Boston workers. And in addition to the Boston Resident Jobs Policy, we have oversight of compliance over several other policies. The Boston Jobs Living Wage and Prevailing Wage Ordinance is in our office. That's the ordinance that requires that all workers providing labor for a job contracted with the City of Boston for $25,000 or more be paid a living wage. Right now, that's $16.38. We just got the calculations. That'll be going up to $17.55 in July, which is one of the biggest one-year increases that policy has seen. We also enforce the Boston Wage Theft Executive Order, which leverages the authority of Boston Licensing Board to ensure that employers are paying their workers fairly. We're providing outreach and training to ensure workers know their rights. We're partnering with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement to put on a webinar just next month. We're also partnering with local worker centers in response to the terrible case with Stash's Pizza to support immigrant workers and making sure they know their rights on the job, and making sure that they understand the resources that the city provides around that. And as Chief Quinn pointed out, we are partnering with Inspectional Services on some new construction safety strategies that we've submitted to City Council on Monday. So that is our office. I'm going to turn it over for now to my colleague Andre, who's going to talk a little bit more about BRJP history, and then Chris will talk a little bit more about where we are in terms of the actual data since we last came before the City Council. And I also just want to thank Andre and Chris for being so unbelievably generous with their time as our cabinet has gotten up to speed in all it needs to know to be able to take over enforcement of the Boston Resident Jobs Policy. So, Andre?
Thank you, Jody and Trin. And thank you, Councilors Mejia and Louis-Jean. I really appreciate the time you've taken to work with us to both sort of better understand the barriers that exist, both sort of operationally and at the level of labor market trends to meeting these goals. So I'm going to keep my piece pretty brief, and I'll talk again when we get to the part of our presentation that's about the recent updates on the implementation of the sanctions policy. But before we get there, I wanted to do just a quick BRJP history and a review of the compliance measures, because those are relevant to the conversation about sanctions that we'll have towards the end of the presentation. So just very quickly, the original ordinance, the original BRJP ordinance was passed in 1983, setting standards on private development projects of 100,000 square feet and any public projects of 50% total work hours needing to go to Boston residents, 25% to people of color, and 10% to women. Those were the original employment standards that were set by the original ordinance, and subsequently in 1985 by executive order, and then finally on January 25th in 2017 by ordinance. The original BRJP ordinance was amended and changed the types of projects, firstly, including private development projects of 50,000 square feet or more, and any public development projects with new employment standards of 51% of total work hours going to Boston residents, 40% to people of color, and 12% to women, and additionally adding apprenticeship goals that mirror those 51, 40, 12% goals for the three categories that I just reviewed. Additionally, in the updated ordinance, 7 compliance measures were established, and these are the compliance measures that contractors who are working on BRJP monitored projects are required to meet. And these are the compliance measures for which violations can amount to sanctions. And we'll talk about that later on, about how we've implemented that part of the policy. But just as a quick review, the 7 compliance measures, the violation of which can lead to a sanction or fine, are attending pre-construction meetings, providing weekly certified payrolls, those are the ones we're going to focus on later in the presentation, attending corrective action meetings, which are meetings held between construction monitors and contractors who are working on BRJP projects, appearing at the BEC meetings when requested, so those are monthly hearings that the Boston Employment Commission holds to review projects that are covered by the BRJP ordinance, providing communications and confirmations, those are to the BRJP office, but namely to construction monitors that are overseeing the projects, providing referrals to the jobs bank, and verifying Boston residents, which is part of our internal workflow to make sure that where Boston residents are participating, that they are verified as Boston residents. So that's just a brief overview of the history and some of the structure of the ordinance, particularly the compliance pieces. And I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Christopher Brown, to review the numbers. I do just want to say before I turn it over that I'm really excited that BRJP is joining this new cabinet that has a more holistic approach to labor compliance. I really do think that the BRJP office and the policy itself is going to be very well supported, and I'm excited to see the progress we can make when that more holistic perspective and approach is brought to bear on the issues that BRJP is meant to address. So I'll turn it over to Chris now.
Before you do, really quick, just wanted to acknowledge that one of our second co-sponsors has joined us. Councilor Anderson is with us from District 7. Thank you. You now have the floor, sir.
Good morning.
No.
Everyone, good morning. Christopher Brown. I'm the manager from the BRJP office. First, I would also like to thank my colleagues, Trin, Jody, and Andre. They've really been great in working with me and the staff and making sure that this policy and the compliance is met to the best of our ability. And thank you, Council, for always pushing, asking questions, and asking for more. And also from the public. The public also keeps us accountable, and we really appreciate that. Before we jump into the numbers, I would like to say that we're in the middle of, as you might know, migration, transformation from one database to the other. It's going well. We think that once we get all the data transferred, all the information transferred to the new system, that you're really going to be able to see a change in the reporting of the work hours and the compliance on the projects that we monitor. As you know, there's a 51% Boston resident goal, 40% people of color, and 12% women goal on the project, and we monitor by work hours. So the data that you're looking at, like I previously stated, we are in a migration from one database to the next. So the data that you're looking at, we thought it would be best just to give you 3 months worth of data because we're still in the, transferring information and data to another database. So we thought this 3-month data would be the most accurate. So we've had 67 total projects within this period of time. 15 of those projects are private projects. Those are the projects that are over 50,000 square feet. We've had 52 public projects, and you can see the public breakdown. There's 20 public facilities department projects, 9 parks, 10 public works. I'm sorry, 16 public works.
Mr. Brown, please, hold on one quick second. It's coming from over here. I want to make sure that we can hear you clearly, and those who are tuning in can hear you. I know if I'm having a hard time, then other people are, and I just want you to back up a little bit from that mic so we can hear you, okay? We appreciate everything that you're doing, and it got to be recorded on the record in a way that we can hear it. So let's just go.
I apologize for that. I think I'm a little excited right now. Let me calm it down. So let me do a little reversal. 67 total projects within this period of time. 15 of those projects are private projects, over 100,000 square feet. 52 public projects. So that would be 20 public facilities department projects, 9 park projects, 16 public works projects, and 7 Mayor's Office of Housing projects, which was previously the Department of Neighborhood Development. So when you look at the data breakdown, the private projects, 467,000 hours, 22% Boston resident.
Time out. Hold on. Cora, we don't have that slide, and Councilman Bijan wants to see it. So, could you?
Are you pushing?
No, I think what you're saying there, do you have that slide? I don't have that breakdown.
Apologies, we're just trying to catch up.
Yeah, sorry. It's not fine.
It's this one, right?
Projects breakdown?
We're here, right? The projects breakdown?
Okay.
Okay, so I have it.
Okay,
You have it?
yeah,
You're
yeah,
good?
just wanted to
Okay.
make sure.
All right, we're good.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, we're just trying to, take you off your little mojo here. You may continue.
Okay, thank you. So if you look at the work hours, so as usual, the private projects bring in the most work hours. In terms of the numbers of projects, there's always a lesser number of projects for the private projects, but they're big projects, the downtown projects, the Seaport area, so you're gonna have a lot of work hours. So for the private projects, 467,000 hours overall. So 22% Boston resident, 38% people of color, and 8% female. The public projects, 117,000 hours, 26% Boston resident, 38% people of color, and 7% female. So when you add the private and the public projects together, you're going to get the total. And for this period of time, it's 585,000 hours, and 22% Boston resident, 38% people of color, and 8% female. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, so the next slide is the projects breakdown by neighborhood. So we have 67 total projects, and these projects include the private and the public projects. I'm not going to go through every neighborhood, but As you can expect, the Dorchester neighborhood usually has the most projects, mainly because it's the biggest neighborhood. And then you see Roxbury with 7 projects, Austin Brighton has 5, so forth and so on, where you look at various locations. So we have public works projects that might span like 2 or 3, be one contract that might span 2 or 3 neighborhoods. So that would be fall into the various locations area.
Okay, next slide, please. Wonderful.
Okay, so the next slide is active projects breakdown. So we're just going to look at the for public projects, the city departments. There's 4 city departments that we monitor, and the Mayor's Office of Housing, previously D&D, Parks, Public Facilities, and Public Works. And I'm not going to go through all of, each category, but the numbers are in front of you. The Public Works Department, they came in at 35% resident, 38% people of color, 8% female. And one thing I will say is, I've been here a while, and I'm very happy with the way that the women percentages have increased. So we were at 4% and 5%. Now we're moving up to 8%. It's not enough. It's not 12%, which is the goal, but I have seen that that percentage move up over time. The Boston resident percentages, they've been in the 20s for the most part for the last 5 or 6 years, and we have seen a slight decrease recently within the last couple of years. They used to be in the upper 20s, now they're mid-20s or so. But the people of color numbers are always up around 40% goal. So we haven't really had that goal is always close to being met or not met.
Can you repeat that one last time, that statement?
The people of color goals. Usually, department-wide, the people of color goals are up around the 40% mark, give or take, which is the goal.
Yep.
And we continue to see, that being the case throughout the years. That's good. I'm sorry that you wasn't able to hear me in the beginning, but I feel I sound a lot better to myself right now, actually.
Yes, Mr. Brown, you did a good job.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is that it for the administration? Oh, we're good. We have one more person. That's a community panelist. JC, you want to do this with this cohort?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, JC, we could. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mejia, thank you for inviting me, as well as your co-sponsors, Councilor Lejeune, Councilor Anderson, President Flynn, Councilor Bach, and then also, of course, Chief Nguyen. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate today, especially virtually on this Good Friday. I am the chair of the Boston Employment Commission, and our team of 5 meets monthly to discuss and review the projects that Chris Brown and the team have articulately talked about earlier today. We're mixed on our approach to what the solutions should be, and I know we're going to talk about accountability a little bit later, and also talk about maybe some of the solutions a little bit later in the program. But I also want to take a moment to make sure that we are providing an opportunity for those that come before us. Some of the history was talked about earlier, but Mel King and his partnership and his legacy with Chuck Turner, we have lost him recently, and I want to just make sure we're acknowledging the work that he has done in this area of construction, especially with the Mel King Institute, as well as other organizations that are not with us today, like Youth Build, Roxbury Community College, and Ben Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology. All of those collectively are working to make sure we can improve the number of Boston residents and people of color and women in the industry. And although we're having a great amount of collaborative conversation and working together, I'm happy to see that the Boston trades will be here today to talk more about what it is that they're doing. Because they, as President Flynn has mentioned, and I think actually Councilor Lejeune has mentioned in the past, that they are key and critical to being able for the city to meet some of their goals. The back end itself, have issued sanctions, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later, for the first time in the history of the Boston Employment Commission dating back to 1993. And these sanctions were primarily issued for administrative issues, not necessarily the lack of meeting the actual goals or numbers of residents, Boston residents, and women and people of color. We continue to be a little bit disappointed in our contracting community, maybe in some ways in our labor community, labor union community, in not being able to really provide structured strategies to make sure that we can improve these numbers kind of universally in all market sectors and through all types of projects. We know that this work does require the effort and energy of all, and the tone of the Boston Employment Commission meetings of that is one of collaboration, one of advice and suggestions, and then also one to just make sure that we are talking about the issues that the contractors and developers are facing so that we too can provide some solutions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on today. But thank you again for the invitation and looking forward to the portion of the panel discussion where there are more thoughts around solutions and as well as the accountability that we recently had with the sanctions that were issued earlier this year. Thank you.
Thank you, JC. So I'm going to open up for questions. And I want to acknowledge the third co-sponsor, Councilor Burrell, District 4, has also joined us. And we're going to start off with the lead sponsor, Councilor Louis Jean, followed by the co-sponsors, and then Councilor Bach, just so you know the order. And you each have 5 minutes. I'm just joking.
Okay. Because I got like a lot of questions.
You got 7 minutes, and then you get a second round.
Okay. Thank you to everyone for this wonderful presentation. We've had these, I'm a new city councilor. This is the third hearing that we've had on BRJP, the first one that we've had in person. And I just want to, it's great to be in the house with all of y'all. And I just appreciate you for being here. Chris, I want to commend you. I think this is the best presentation of the data that I've seen in one of these hearings, which is why I wanted to make sure that I had the right slide in front of me. And so I appreciate the breakdown, especially because I think the last time that we talked about in our last hearing, we talked about how in certain categories, the private projects and the public projects, some of the numbers tend to differ. And here, based on these 3 months, it looks like there's not a great differential, even if these 3 months may not be representative of the entirety. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But before I do, I'd like to put in a request for future, for future breakdowns like this, if we could further break down or disaggregate the data regarding people of color, and make sure that we are able to break it down by Black, by Latinx, Asian, so that we can look at that number in a disaggregated fashion, because I think that could also give us information that would be pertinent to us, what we care about here in the city and on the city council. Does that make sense? Okay, great. And so back to my first question. Again, the presentation from all of you was really incredible. My first question is about the difference between public and private projects. Here, it looks like the numbers based on the 3 months are pretty similar, but we know in the past, folks have stated that we are better at meeting our numbers with respect to people of color on private projects with respect to public projects. And Andre, I believe that's a statement that you've made. Is that correct? Or if you want to break down that.
One quick second. I wanted to acknowledge that Chief Trin, you need to leave at 11, right?
Yeah, but I'm going to stay as long as I.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that if my colleagues have questions specifically for the chief, that we could do things a little bit out of order to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to ask the chief any questions that they may have. I know we'll be cutting into your time, but I just want to make sure that anyone here has questions for the chief, that while you're here with us, that we can still, honor that. So I just wanted to do a gauge. I see Councilor Bach said no questions for the chief. No questions for the chief. Do you have any questions for the chief specifically? Yes. So Councilor Louis Jean, do you mind asking a question specifically to Chief? I know I have questions for the chief.
Yeah,
so,
I have questions as well.
So if you could do your questions to the chief first, and then I'll go to Councilor Anderson for her questions to the chief, and I'll ask my questions to the chief, and then you can continue with your questions if that's fine.
That's fine. Chief, I want to thank you especially for your commitment to the actual work and not to all the things that sometimes surround the work. 2 questions for you. You talked about how like at some point you got to end it's not about the job training, it's about the actual job. Yesterday when the mayor was announcing the 7,000 youth jobs, something that Director Cope stated that I really appreciated is that there's an upcoming youth jobs fair, and they are really encouraging employers at the upcoming youth jobs fair to make job offers like right then and there. And I think that is a really great model. I'm wondering if that's one that we can think about using and encouraging when we do have job fairs, that we encourage or require that folks are leaving with job commitments, or that employers are buying into committing to hiring at least X number or percentage of people. Have we done that in the past? Can we do it?
Great, you can hear me. I think that's a great question, Counselor. I mean, I think the job fair is one point that we can touch on, which is an entry point for employers, but it can't be the only one. So one of the things we are doing is really in our either our procurement, we have, just because it's not within our jurisdiction, I know we're working closely with Chief Idiwu, and also the Office of Budget Management, Procurement, Audit Department, to see if we can have some kind of employment agreements within city contracts. And that's why I had emphasized the Green New Deal. I mean, there's a lot of investments, and how can we work with those big investments, procurement, while it's going out, and catch them in the beginning as a strong criteria moving forward. So it helps us with the compliance once we get to that third leg. So that's one area. The other is all of our workforce training grants are what we called, and Councilor Mejia knows this well with our Neighborhoods Jobs Trust, is that they're called performance-based contracts or grants, which requires that the vendor or grantee has guaranteed jobs at the end after the training is done. Having said all of that, I think the job fairs are really important, but some of these jobs are longer and more arduous work than just a job fair. So that means working with hiring managers to open up these positions and make a commitment to hiring. And that is year-round, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and not necessarily just the job fair hiring on the spot. What we want to do is work with employers to see how we can work with them in partnerships and what timeline makes sense for them, and not necessarily just a job fair. I think when we're talking about youth employment in the summer, as you know, Counselor, it's very different from a full-time benefited job that's year-round for an adult. And so that kind of commitment and strategy of engagement from employer is very different from, hey, can you hire young people on the spot for 6 weeks? It's an automatic low-hanging fruit for employers to say yes. But it's harder when you're working with full-time adult employers year-round with benefited jobs. And so we take that longer-term approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I hope that answers your questions, and we'd love to follow up with our other longer-term engagement strategies with employers as well. And we're not interested in just rapid job placements for our residents. We're interested in career pathway jobs that pay at least a prevailing wage and employer-benefited packages, and also upward mobility for those workers. So a rapid job placements on the spot is probably not for some of our longer-term vision of quality job placements.
Thank you, Chief. And I understand that, and I just think if there are things that we can learn from our desire to do those rapid placements, what can we learn from that in this space? I think that there are opportunities for us to think about what that teaches us from what is it that we can require of employers. But you mentioned something that is important here, and whenever we are having hearings here at MSBA and we're talking about city projects, it ties into my initial question that I was asking Andre, is that those are the projects that, if we are trying to breathe truth into this ordinance that so many people fought for, we should be leading the way on city-owned projects in meeting these numbers. And so maybe not so great, right? Maybe fine that we are the same as private projects, but I believe, as data has been presented in the past, that to show that there's been a marked difference, and getting into what that tells us, I think is important. But a follow-up question for you, Chief. Where is the Office of Worker Empowerment? Where are you physically located?
We are physically located at 43 Hawkins Street, which is diagonally across from City Hall. We also have offices at 1010 Mass Ave, which Deputy Chief Cope is located with his staff for the youth employment piece. And the Center for Working Families is in Nubian Square at 7 Palmer.
Awesome, thank you. Discussions that we've had prior on the BRJP, and something that I really want us to invest in, is to what it would look like for the city of Boston to have a worker center. And I know I've talked to all of you about this, that really synthesizes, like, so many of us, so many people are separately and in their own working on this when it comes to the construction industry, when it comes to the life sciences boom that also has the potential of leaving behind our Black and brown folk. And so when we have an office that's committed to workers, that is in our communities, that I think could be very powerful to synthesize all of the work that we're trying to do. We have examples of that, right? Building pathways is in our community, right, in Eggleston. There is Work 2, which is Nubian Square, but I think we as a city should own and be centered in community in this discussion, where our Black and brown folks are, which is what we're trying to do with the people of color Target. And for the very reason that you said, job fairs, and look, I go back and forth. I think job fairs are great because they're exposure. Sometimes I'm like, is this the best way? And then I'll go to a job fair, and like a lot of people will show up and like, wow, job fairs are really amazing and they're an important touch point. But permanence and meeting people where they are is like an important part of this work, especially because in Black and brown communities, when you have been excluded for so long, it can lead to apathy, and you can think that, like, okay, there's nothing for me. And if we are centered right where people are, I think that could really, really move the needle. So we'd love to hear you all and your thoughts on that, because that's something that my office cares deeply about. And I know that there are folks in your office too who think this could be a great model. I talk to JC all the time, and folks that we're trying to, what can we do to continue pushing forward here? And I think that is one great step.
Yeah, we would love a workers center. We work in collaboration, as my colleague will elaborate. Many worker advocacy, worker centers, both labor management agencies, many labor stakeholders, and workers' rights to really incorporate their thinking and their policies. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and then we put it into our work and embed it in our programs and our policies. So we may not have a physical worker center. That's something that we do want to think about, absolutely. And if I may just point out, answer your second question about the difference between the private versus the public discrepancies on the numbers. I think I have not dive deeper. I think one of the major discrepancy between that is that collective bargaining is in public projects, and sometimes collective bargaining assumably has the same workers in that role based on the collective bargaining of that particular project in a public facility owned by the city of Boston. And so that number may stay stagnant based on some of those provisions. Now, I think it's good once you identify where the root is that can't move the needle. I think it's very good to look at collective bargaining renegotiations on how we can get more diversity on the jobs based on that, because the city wants to learn and do better too. new. I mean, something that hasn't worked 20 years ago or 30 years ago doesn't necessarily mean it works today and moving forward. So we have to look at some of those tools that we overlook in the past. So I don't have evidence based on that, but I think my strong assumptions when we're looking at those kind of data, I bet you it's going to be around collective bargaining, and we need to change some of those practices.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to move on, Councilor Lujan, to Councilor Anderson, if that's okay, because I know, Trini, I want to be respectful of your time, and I also have some questions. So I'm going to move on to Councilor Anderson. You now have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, the role of, or at least one of your major goals, are to coordinate and build on the work of the city's workforce employment initiative. Could you tell me how you plan on coordinating exactly or focusing on construction crucial career pipelines or connecting with job opportunities and skill programs?
Yep. So there's various various strategies and outcomes for those pipelines. Specific industries, construction. We have information around construction, hospitality, healthcare is obviously our biggest ones. We have past performance data and also projected ones that we've seen, and also clean energy that we are focusing on. In terms of the construction piece, these are the Boston Employment Commission is one entity in which it displays data on compliance, but we do have a set of outcomes and also different pipelines for the workforce training pieces. I can delve into that, but I'm not sure if we do have enough time, or I can follow up with specific projects or pipelines and industries for you. But right now, I don't have the specific data to answer that question, but I'm happy to meet with you and our team to answer that question for you. Is there a specific overall industry within workforce that you're looking at? Are you looking at short-term industries? Are you looking at post-secondary education pipelines within those industries? So we have a lot of data on specific industries, and within those industries, different strategies.
Through the chair, could you submit that data?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I guess whenever we get back here, it seems like we have a conversation, you're asked questions, and they're answered, kind of, and then, or for the most part, they're answered. And then when we get to the point about data or metrics or tracking them or monitoring them, then the conversation gets lost. And I think, honestly, and I've said this before, it's probably the process which we use here in the chamber. That is one is counterintuitive almost. If I ask you a question and the data comes back, the follow-up, then hopefully a working session where we're actually coming back to that question. And that almost never happens. And so the burden, I think, is on us to come back to that conversation, but it feels to me that we don't actually have implemented metrics. And the data conversation seems to stop. We don't know exactly. We're working on these efforts, and we're looking at, people of color in terms of contracts increasing, but then overall in the city, the numbers are actually declining. Diversity is declining. Although our cabinet, the mayor's cabinet, is the most diverse it's ever been, the city overall for Black employees is declining. Do you have any feedback or any opinion on as to why do you think that's happening?
I mean, I think that is a good recommendation, that we have to do a better job with this new cabinet. And one of the vision is to create a dashboard. We're not there yet in terms of creating it, but it is on our planning structure to do that piece and create a dashboard. I mean, we do have and hold two largest career centers. They're called mass hire centers. One is in Roxbury with Goodwill Memorial, and the other one is Jewish Vocational Services. And we do have light touches with career readiness for Boston residents. Pre-COVID, we served 15,000 residents annually. Post-COVID, about 8,000. And within that, we have specific metrics on the growth industries in the Boston area. And we do release an annual report, which is only tied to our funding regulations, but it's not tied to the overall city of Boston. That's a great idea. Maybe we should do and think about a dashboard for all of the Boston areas. Now, having said that, I want to caveat by saying that we focus on those who don't have a bachelor's degree. So a DEI integration strategy within employers is very different from training those who don't have a bachelor's degree. And I would even argue, if you disaggregate what Boston residents, BIPOC, and those who don't have a bachelor's degree, you have to also organize that bucket into multiple economic barriers. So those who have quarries is very different. You can't lump them in. Those who don't have a GED, those who have a high school diploma in some community college and workforce job readiness, that's a different bucket. And those who are incumbent workers and those are dislocated. All of those I would say population, for lack of a better term, has a different strategy. So you can't use a standardized metrics amongst all of those subgroups per se. So you're right, we've got to do a better job with what's the elevator pitch for all of the city of Boston, which not necessarily have the worker empowerment jurisdiction. We really focus on those who don't have a bachelor's degree and have economic barriers within those. But we need to really organize that. Everybody thinks workforce development is in one large bucket within our cabinet, but it's actually not, because the public narrative of workforce development is K-12 and our higher institution and colleges. But we're trying to break that down to say, look, we're focusing on those who are have multiple barriers and those who don't have a bachelor's degree.
It's that level of thorough processing in different categories that is going to actually intentionally access those different subcategories or populations. And they're not buckets, right? They're different in every way and different needs. A dashboard then could at least monitor the disaggregated data, and then the strategies that you're talking about being that they have to defer from category to category, then I think has to be coupled with the technical support that actually ties or connects them to the individual plans for each. And then, so the question here is, does your job fairs, and I apologize if I haven't attended one, address that level of thoughtfulness? If you understand that you have different categories and people, then are we doing job fairs by categories, or are we doing one job fair and then people are just sort of like, where do I go?
Yep, that's a really good question. We don't do solar job fairs. The one that Councilor Louisian talked about is the April the 22nd at the Reggie Lewis. We're going to have a youth job fairs that hire summer employment. So very specific. And
I agree that for youth, that strategy would work, right? Not
Absolutely.
for other, but yeah, to the point though of addressing different populations.
Yes, I mean, we've collaborated with stakeholder partners for, we don't want to label it per se like Corey friendly, but we do pick up the phone and say, who do we know in the city of Boston who are employers that have minimal barriers to entry, and we know that in our heads that one of the economic barriers are those who have Corey. So we intentionally work with Goodwill, which is one of the strategic partners that has a job fair, and we work with them on those employers. So it does take a more tailored approach. It takes a lot of resources, and at the end of the day, if employers can't make a commitment to hiring, we're not doing that piece. We rather use our time and commitment to other things than just a job fair. But we do parse it out.
I have to close, sorry, my time's up, but I would just say that to Councilor Lujin's point about being in community where people are, and making things accessible, services accessible, the thoroughness and the thoughtfulness that you've put into this is impressive. It does need to be also coupled with representation. So I want to see your org chart by demographic, because obviously representation matters, and we want to see how intentional your department is being with that as well. If you haven't gotten to it, are you working on it? But if you could submit it to us, it would be appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. It is Good Friday, which is why I'm being so good to y'all. But I know that Councilor Bach wants to have some remarks because she'll need to leave.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for indulgence. I'm not going to ask questions. I just wanted to apologize to the panel for having to go. I do have to be at church shortly. But I just wanted to thank you all again. As the chief alluded to, I obviously am making a jump over to the Boston Housing Authority, and this is a completely critical piece of the Housing Authority's work as well. Enshrined also over there in sort of Section 3 and the federal commitments to really making sure that the folks who live in BHA housing and on BHA vouchers have work opportunities. So really looking forward to partnering quite closely with the cabinet. And so I'm sorry that I'm missing this chance to grill you as a counselor, but I'm really looking forward to that close partnership. And I just wanted to, again, shout out, I know they're waiting patiently, but we've got the Building Pathways team here. And just the fact that apprentice program, which has grown and becomes such an important standard for other apprentice programs in the city to reach, is something that came out of a project labor agreement with the Boston Housing Authority. Really underscores for me like how much opportunity there is for us, both here at the city and at the Housing Authority to really drive not just the conversation but actual solutions on this front. So just wanted to say that and thank everyone and apologize for having to step away. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Chief, I know you have been really patient, so I'll just ask a few questions, and I know you have other things to do as well. So I want to just for the record note that I've only been in office for 3 years, and every time that I've been in front of this particular hearing, I have asked for a dashboard. So I want to make sure that whatever we need to do to help support that dashboard to become a reality, would like to know what the mechanics are, right? Is it a budget thing? Is it a do it thing? Whatever it is thing, I want to know what the thing is so that we can actually have it. Because otherwise, it's just going to be another 6 months from now, and we're not going to have a real accountability system in place that is going to help all of us set up ourselves up for success. So I just want to note that for the record. Councilor Anderson has asked for it in the past as well, and I know that this is something that we are really hoping to be able to support you all in making it happen. So I would hope that the next time that we're together, we come with, here's how we're going to make it happen. We're in budget season right now, and if y'all want it, we can make it happen, right? So let's just name it, and let's just do it, right? So, Councilor Rowe said that he didn't have any questions for the chief, right? So you changed your mind?
Yep.
You have a
one
question?
question.
Let me find out. Well, I'm flowing right now, so let me just go quickly. So, I want to kind of preface this by stating that, there is this narrative, or there's an assumption, right, that, I'll speak for myself, that all I do is bark and like I'm a little chihuahua, which is fine. I'm okay with that. But I also bring some skills into this conversation. I used to work at Goodwill. I was a job developer. I was training women who were coming out of welfare and preparing them to work in the work space, right? And what I did is I decided to throw away the entire curriculum that was presented to me to prepare these women. Because what we were preparing them for were jobs that weren't really viable careers, that weren't going to close the wealth gap that we had been talking about, right? So I do appreciate Goodwill and the work that they do, and I'm not here to say otherwise, but I think when we think about workforce development, we have to expand what workforce development is all about. It's not just about getting people jobs, it's about making sure that we're retaining them and that they're moving up the ladder and that we're holding ourselves accountable to that, right? Which is one of the reasons why I'm really excited about the Neighborhoods Jobs Trust, which was written in 1983, which is not meeting this moment. And so we have an opportunity right now to really pause and say, what are we going to do in the city to ensure that not only the building trades are up to par, that the city's up to par, but that we are meeting this moment. And now, as we continue to have this conversation, I'm curious, what do we need to do right now to update the policy that we review twice a year? What would you recommend, Trin? What do we need to do differently so that we can move differently? What would be one, amendment that you can offer that will help you do this work differently?
Yep, I'm going to defer to my colleagues, but there's one. I have to say that the city and bureaucracies, and this is not on the Wu administration because she just got elected. This is a legacy issue.
That's right.
That bureaucracies don't have good back-end systems. So there's two things that I think that the back-end, which is why we've really devoted ourselves to operational excellence. One is we need coherent databases that work and a coherent way in which we are collecting data. Because if we don't have that data integrity, we cannot articulate a baseline, good, bad, or ugly, and make recommendations. So really, we are working on a sales force, getting a software and training staff to get a coherent, efficient way in which we are collecting data. The second piece is that it's very, very frustrating because every time when I'm asked a question in either city council, resident groups, or a resident, in my head, I get really frustrated because in my head, I'm always like, we could do a better job. Right. And we don't do it because everything within the city government, whether it's state, federal, and not just the city of Boston, we're segregated by whatever personality, whatever departments. So in order for us to do effective compliance, we have to do it in collaboration with the audit department, procurement, ISD. And so we need to do that. We need to do a better job. That's why the cabinet has to be like, we can't do this job because I'm not a procurement officer. I'm not a hiring manager, nor am I an IT specialist. Right. So we need to build those collaboration so that we can work efficiently in the back end. And unfortunately, we don't do that because that hasn't been the legacy of that since I was born, which is 1973, and coming to this country. But we need to fix that. The third piece I have to say is that it's always good to lay a policy or a vision. We need to operationalize that. And that means rolling up your sleeves and working with managers, hiring managers and frontline staff to train them in doing what needs to be done moving forward. That's just the operations piece, because you got to change the cultural piece of a bureaucracy, meaning you're working here for the city of Boston and for residents and for communities. So if there is no buy-in, perhaps some of these, some of the workforce needs to look at ways in which they can move on that more aligns with their value statement. So I think those things have to happen simultaneously. But what's within our jurisdiction today and in 3 to 5 years or 10 years is building a back end of technology for reporting data and regrouping and retraining staff to think differently to change the culture. We can't do everything, but we can do something within our jurisdiction. Yeah. I'll tell you one thing, compliance is not one department or one person or one staff. You have no idea the kind of, you might have ideas, but the idea of collaboration within city departments has to be there. Like, we need to make good friends with the auditing department and the procurement officers that sit there and do the paperwork, because that's where the real work is.
That's right, that's right. That's why I love when you are in this chamber or when you are participating, because you keep it 100 and you bring it, you know, to the bare, like, most layman's term so that people understand the facts. The facts of the matter is that we are not meeting this moment because we're so caught up in bureaucracy, and the culture, which is the hardest thing to shift, is to believe that Black and brown people can actually do the work. And I think that that is, you know, one of the real reasons why we have a hard time in a lot of these spaces and places, because people still don't think that we are worthy. I'm curious if you could just tell me in terms of recruitment and retention. And the reason why I say this is because the women that graduated from my program at Goodwill between 2010 and 2012 are still employed. Okay? So there's a difference between you get a job, but you keep it and you move up in the career ladder. So I want you to address kind of like, what are we going to do differently to ensure that not only are we just putting people in jobs, but we're retaining them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things. We're already strained in capacity and energy and financial resources to really just train into good paying entry-level jobs. I have to be real that moving up the ladder requires a different skill set and a focus, which is incumbent worker training. We're trying to do that with our $23 million EDA grant. So we're monitoring how that works. I guarantee you that that strategy needs to be paralleled with what companies call DEI integration. So that is, people won't retain and stay in a company. Both you and I, even if we're so-called educated and informed, we won't stay in an employer if that employer doesn't treat us right and the staff and diversity doesn't look like us. Right. That's very, very true. So that means that employers need to make a real commitment to hiring equity, racially, and gender. That's not within our jurisdiction. We try to push legislation to have simply to say employers, and we're doing this within life sciences, simply for private employers to give us just data about who you hire as Boston residents, even if they're educated and have a master's degree or bachelor's degree, and if they're from Boston. We can't even get that data from employers to understand that. So you're right. We can't.
So what can we do to change that? Because this is where I feel like a lot of people get a pass, is because we don't have the levers, or ability to really hold people accountable. Because in the building trades, you can sign up a whole bunch of people to work and you reach your quota, and then within 5 or 6 months, those people are no longer on those work sites. So it's very transactional, and I'm just curious, like, in terms of accountability, what are we doing differently to make sure that you're not just bringing people on board for a hot second to reach your quota goals, but then those people are no longer there. So something has to give, because those are city dollars.
I think, let me just clarify. I can't get that data, but collectively, perhaps we can think about ways in which we can take incremental steps for each industry to get that data. So we're working on it with life sciences, so I'll be happy to report back what are the lessons around that. We're trying to work with different employers and different labor management agencies to articulate some of their baseline data so we'll know where we're at. I'd rather not have this conversation because I feel like our work has to be moving forward. And just to get baseline data from employers, it has been, I have to say, not very transparent and running around doing things that I think if we all came to the table, we can come with faster solutions to solve systemic issues.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to be mindful of time, and I know that my councilor colleague, Councilor Burrell, actually has a question for you, and I want to make sure that he has the opportunity to ask.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll keep it quick, and thank you to the panel for being here today. And one thing that jumped out on me on this presentation was the $2 billion project to upgrade or renovate every BPS school in the next 10 years, and just kind of is echoing what the other councils are saying is, you know, what is our outreach when we, you know, most of our capital projects are on a timeline, so like, and we know that they're coming up. They go through these phases. So like, what is our outreach to like BIPOC communities and those contractors, letting them know and informing them on these opportunities that are going to be, you know, up for RFPs in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to do is grasp what this $2 billion looks like first. And so there's about, I believe, this is an estimate, is about $120 million into 7 schools right now. We're trying to get a handle on procurement contracts of that and incorporate labor standards in that. We hope that we're not late for that because our cabinet was just formed in September. Even though I've been here for quite some time, there are some tools that we can quickly implement in the past that we haven't been able to. So I think that's something that we're trying to do with what's already out there on the streets. We are looking at different scoring structures to add into procurement that those who have DEI or BIPOC Boston residents in their applications get a higher score. So those are the specific tools that we know works already, and we can quickly see if we can integrate those 2 aspects in the procurement process for the Green New Deal. Now, we are looking at where is the rest of the Green New Deal as we move forward. But in parallel to that strategy, there's an RFP out from, I believe, either ISD or BPS on looking at a firm or entity that can help us parse out what are the legal framework in which we can enforce and operationalize those standards of the city. Once we do that, then we work with agencies and workforce training partners and all of our partners on the ground to do the outreach. Because I don't want to do outreach if the jobs are not there. That's just not something that our neighborhoods and our communities deserve. So really focusing on procurement and framework to get those outcomes so that the outreach can begin effectively, which is something that we're working on in tandem. Sometimes the city doesn't do a great job with outreach. So we have to partner with our community agencies to do that work, and our community colleges and our graduates and our nonprofits, in which we partner with 80 of them on a year-round basis to do that tailored outreach for us.
Thank you. And just want to make sure like this is, you know, $2 billion. It's a I won't say once in a lifetime, but yes, it's a historic investment in our Boston public schools, and making sure that we are centered and being intentional to excluding our BIPOC communities, contractors, and trade workers in this opportunity it's something to mark that. I want to make sure that our city doesn't miss that opportunity.
Let me tell you, Councilor, we work day and night to make sure we don't miss nothing. So that's number one. And just remember, $2 billion is a lot to us at this moment in time, and we should not miss the opportunity. But annually, the city's budget is $3 billion a year. So what we learn and reap from the best practices and lessons from this $2 billion is something that we need to do beyond this initial investment. And some things, we don't have to wait to $2 billion. Some things we can do today and tomorrow. Things we should have been doing 10 years ago, we should be doing without it.
No, and I completely agree. I think this, whatever initiative and engagement strategy that we put in place for, the renovations in the schools, we should look to do that with all our capital plan. Thank you, and I'll defer back to the chair.
Yeah, thank you. And, I think that Councilor Rowell has opened up a can of worms, right? Because when we think about dollars and we think about investments, and if we think about that $2 billion, and we say, you know what? $2 billion of that X amount of millions will only be earmarked to support initiatives that are going to help us reach these goals, and only construction sites that fulfill that will be having access to that $2 billion, right? So I know we can't do all that because we just don't, we're not set up for that, and we can't do that. But I just feel like money comes in and out of these chambers all the time, but they're not making their way into the pockets of Black and brown residents in the city of Boston. And I think that that is one of the reasons why these conversations are so important. I know Councilor Anderson has her light up, and we're not ready to let you go, Chief, because we're here for all of this. So, and I just want to thank our other panelists that are being so patient. So, in the interest of letting everybody be fully expressed, Councilor Anderson, this is your last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your grace. Chief, I guess just following up on my colleague's question about outreach prior to, I understand not setting up false expectations. However, because we're so far behind, because we've disenfranchised Black communities to such a horrible point, wouldn't it make sense that we are campaigning around this, that it's a citywide effort to campaign to bring people out of poverty, to increase equity, to do that level of DEI, what did you call it?
It's just a
DEI
integration.
Strategies. What's sad about that term, it's a good intention, it's a good intended term, but what's sad about that term is that we have to do a DEI integration. Why do we have to do a DEI integration? Shouldn't it just be, automatic? And since it isn't, since we know that we've caused so much harm, and yes, prior to this administration, yes, prior to your time, but here we are. So the intentionality, I think, it's actually investing in the people as well. So not just the jobs that are supposed to get the people. So, for example, this cabinet or these departments, but also the intention would be investing in the campaigning to get people ahead of time, so that there's no excuses, because we always land to the point where it's like, oh, there's not enough Black people applying. There aren't enough Black people qualified when they do apply. So shouldn't we be trying to catch up and get ahead of it instead of waiting until, and then every Black person is not ready, or most Black people are not ready for the job when we do advertise it?
Yeah, I mean, I think your question is one that is very well articulated. In my head, I'm parsing out some of the challenges to that. I mean, we work closely with the AG's Office on Racial Discrimination and also labor compliance. There's some federal regulations on hiring that we think that employers shouldn't be doing, but we don't have our cabinet doesn't have jurisdiction to prosecute per se. There's questions around legal framework that needs to be addressed. I mean, I think there's a simple question, never mind those who don't have a bachelor's degree. This is not my focus of work per se right now.
Then why does BRJP exist if it's not legally standing?
I think that it does exist. What we're trying to do is move it towards having a stronger legal compliance infrastructure so that we can provide sanctions for those who can't meet those standards.
But the one that exists currently is not fully functional yet. That's my point. With whatever we have, can we get ahead of it? Can we campaign? Because there's going to be a deadline, there's going to be timelines that most poor and disenfranchised working class people can't catch up with. So why aren't we campaigning right now to say, at least so that people are aware? We are aware, and the nerds, and all due respect, the nerds at home, the nerds that are civically engaged are watching right now, but I don't know that people that need jobs and need help with tech assistance are watching and understand that this is happening.
And I really do appreciate Councilor Anderson really leaning in on kind of like what we're going to do in this moment to shift, right? Because a lot of the stuff that, and I think this is probably where the level of frustration comes in, is that we come here with a lot of aspirational goals and we talk about what we can't do. And I have, this desire, what can we do in the more immediate to shift culture? And I think what Councilor Anderson is really trying to push us to do and to think about, let's not wait another 6 months to come back. Let's make a commitment to brainstorm and say, here's what we can do right now to address this moment, and here's one thing that we could specifically do within the jurisdictions that we have to work with to help address that. One thing. Chief, if you could think of just one thing that at least we can commit to, just because I really do believe people are getting tired of having the same conversation.
So I think one thing that we can commit to is building this dashboard overall for not just BRJP and construction, but I think that we need to at least have a plan of action on how this dashboard will be designed and what numbers do we start. It's not going to be perfect, but we're going to commit to that dashboard. And BRJP could be one of that dashboard, and building a data system to get the numbers for that dashboard.
Okay.
Now, we can't have the dashboard next time we come to see you, but we'll definitely probably have a plan, but give me some time.
Yeah, and I just want to know for the record that we've been talking about this dashboard since 2021, 2022. We have been talking about it. So now the goal is there is a commitment made by the chief that we're going to make it happen. And so I want whoever's listening in to know that we're going to make it happen.
Funding too,
Right.
to do that.
Yep.
I mean, I don't, I'm
We got
not
you.
an IT person.
Listen,
Nor an engineer, even though I tried to do a quick study with my colleagues, but we will try.
Like Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley says, change can't wait, and we're not going to wait anymore. We're going to seize this moment, and we're going to talk about producing a dashboard that's going to disaggregate the data, because we say people of color. I want to know what color, right? I want to know exactly, Black, Latinx. I want the data broken down. And then I also want in that dashboard, as we talked in the past, who are the usual suspects that are not showing up for the city of Boston in ways that are helping us reach our goals. We had a list of folks who were not good partners. That should be part of the data. Who are the folks who bring our people in and then 6 months later let them go? Like, that should be part of the data. That level of accountability and transparency is only going to help us get better.
Can I wrap up my point, please?
can't. I'm not asking for money.
I was just going to say that I guess the dashboard should be three parts, not just showing the harm, disaggregating data, different subcategories, and where people are disenfranchised and where they need technical assistance, but also it should also offer the information where, like, what jobs are coming up. So it should be like all tied together. So jobs available, what's happening in terms of current efforts, and also in terms of applicants, their demographics and the different subcategories, as you mentioned, educational level or training needed, and then also the links to actually get to technical assistance in order to get to the different supports that you talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chief, I just want to thank you for your patience and for staying here longer than what you had anticipated. But I think, because you are the new chief in town, and because you have been so committed.
I don't feel like a new chief in town, but that's,
because you've
fine.
You've been so committed to this work. And I think, every single time that you are in front of us, you always bring the truth. And I think that's, we see so many politicians that come through here, and I think one thing that I can always count on you is to always tell it like it is. And that is so incredibly refreshing, because you're not here just to give us the lip service, which is what we get from everybody. So I just want to say thank you for always just bringing it the way that you do and letting us know where the areas of growth are and how we can help support you do that. So I want to give you an opportunity to have any closing statements, because I want to make sure that my colleagues have other questions that none of y'all are gone. Don't be trying to leave, Mr. Brown. We're not done with y'all yet. So my colleagues have some questions for the rest of the panelists, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to have any closing remarks, if any.
No, absolutely. I'll just be quick. First, I want to apologize that this has been a Q&A just with my work, and we have a. So I just want to thank everybody who's been here just to be taking part in this conversation. The other thing I do want to offer is that we're happy to meet with all counselors differently, separately, working groups, sub-working groups, to give you an overlay or overview. And not just one meeting, but several meetings, have a continuous partnership with you. I know it's not just at a hearing. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we have a good open line of communications with all our council members as well. The second piece is, just for clarification, we're committed to the dashboard, but we're not there yet. So I think all these, we took as much notes as possible. We have our wish list as well in our head. So what we're going to do is just process what makes sense to start. So when we do come back, I just want you to know that we won't have a perfect product, but we'll have a vision on how we move forward with the dashboard. So just on the record, we're going to do due diligence on that, but it's not going to be perfect, but at least it's a start to build the partnership and start this dashboard.
You can tell that you are a worker. Thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution, for all your work.
We are grateful. We really are. So I'm going to move on, and I know that normally we do 7 minutes per panel, and with Trin, we each all had like 15, so I just want to be mindful, because we do have other people who are here, been waiting patiently. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to be super mindful of that, and I'm going to do 5 minutes instead of 7 for the next round of questions. Councilor Louis-Jean, just to keep equity here. So thank you, Chief. Councilor Louis-Jean, you have 5 minutes on the floor. Go.
Thank you. Is J.C. Burton, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. And I also do want to thank our panelists coming after. I know that you have been waiting patiently, and when you have a lot of counselors, sometimes it's getting to a lot of questions, but I want to thank you for being here and for your willingness to participate. I have a pointed question for each person. Hopefully it can just take 1 minute. Question for Andre is about, if you could, I was talking about data disaggregation, if you could speak to that a little bit, if there's anything we can learn from disaggregating the data when we look at public versus private.
You're talking about the people of color performance specifically on
Yeah,
public versus
whether
private?
it's people of color, Boston, or, yeah.
I'm sorry, could you clarify?
Well, in previous BRJP hearings, we've talked about how the public and private numbers are different between people, between like the percentage of people of color, and I believe that some of that was attributed to union versus non-union. And Chris, if you could speak to it.
Absolutely. So typically in the past, public projects have performed better than the private projects. And in all the categories, I would say the only category that's been about equal is the women category. But in terms of the Boston residents and people of color, the public projects have performed better, and public projects are typically a mixture of union and non-union contractors. The private projects are solely union. So the public have performed better over years.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think when we, a year ago, specifically for people of color, I think the public projects monitored by BRJP were performing better than the private projects. I think the numbers were around like 45 or 48 for people of color for the public projects we were monitoring in April of 2022.
Okay, thank you. My follow-up question is also to you, Chris. In previous meetings, and when I talk about the Worker Center, it's something that you've talked about, having a central place for folks that has the job bank and place where they can go to learn about jobs. If you could expound a bit about the benefits you think of having like a centralized location.
Yeah, so what I've seen is training. It's about training. You're not going to, you need to have the skills. You're not, a plumbing company is not going to hire a person, for the most part, off the street. You should have at least a basic level of knowing what being a plumber is all about, right? The different tools that are used. I think when individuals have the basic skills, then not only in construction, but in any industry, they're better. They probably have a better chance of landing a job in that profession. So what I see in construction is that it's about training. I think we need a training center. I've said it before, and the only training facilities that are around for construction now are not in Boston. They're in Lawrence. They're in communities outside of Boston. So I'm a big advocate of training and having some type of training facility in Boston. It doesn't necessarily have to be just for construction. There could be other professions within that training center as well. Building Pathway does a good job, but I think I'm speaking of a training center with more people, a couple of hundred people at a time, right? As opposed to, again, maybe the 15 or 20 that Building Pathways have, even though, it's an excellent program and they do a good job.
Thank you. Jody, you brought up the living wage ordinance. Just wanted to just have a quick, how are we doing with compliance right now as is? We're talking about building upon it, but if you could just.
We're building out, sorry about that. Can you hear me? Yep. We are building out compliance and regrouping post-COVID. It was definitely tracking of contracts fell off a little bit, and we're working now to ensure, frankly, the living wage as $16.38 is pretty close to the current minimum wage. So what we're seeing in terms of compliance is that most of the covered vendors are paying more than that because it is close to minimum wage. I think I'll be curious to see what happens as it increases to $17.55 starting in July, and we're starting to get the word out to covered vendors that that's the case, and making sure that folks are preparing both for compliance, those with contracts, but those bidding on contracts understand the new rate.
And how is that living wage calculation made?
I can say it's more complicated than there are.
Because that to me doesn't sound like a living wage in a city. We talk about our Boston numbers, which are not good because of.
Yeah, there are different ways of calculating the living wage, and I think that this is something that the Living Wage Advisory Committee is very interested in regrouping around. The current method is the calculations done by the Boston Planning Development Agency, and I can share with you the details on what is taken into account and how the current calculations are made, and also other options for how we may do that.
Thank you. And if I may, one question to
Yes,
JC.
I just want to note that Councilor Anderson has a hard stop, so, just wanted to be mindful of her time as well. So you could have one.
Just one quick. JC, thank you for being with us, especially on Good Friday. I know a lot of folks, myself included, I know this is a very sacred day. Wanted to make sure that we got this. I want to just, you talked about the sanctions process, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on whether you think the sanctions process, and I'm happy to hear that we're moving forward because that was a metric for a long time, but is it the right direction? Is it going to take us where we want to go on BRJP? Is it the most effective? Is it an effective way of us trying to meet our BRJP goals?
Thank you for the question. I think that the current sanctions as it stands is really an administrative sanction. I think that there was a slide up previously that identified the 7-8 ways that a company can be sanctioned, and primarily it's for paperwork. It's not for the failure to meet the engagement that we're looking for of Boston residents, of people of color or women. It's specifically for administrative tasks. And in that would suggest that there's a company that may be lacking in their administrative skills or their ability to meet the paperwork requirements, and not necessarily the incentive to have more Boston residents on projects, women of color, people of color and women. I think that we need to incentivize the behavior that we really want, that there is more reward going to companies that are higher in meeting these thresholds. And then also we need to think about how we can restructure the penalties, that it really is aiming at the companies and firms that are not meeting the numbers. We need to also get more information and support from our unions. Even though we talked about the public projects being a little bit more successful, I think the more success we have is limited to a smaller portion of those projects, which are housing projects that have typically and historically in the past had better numbers. Of late, we've seen that the housing projects and the residential projects, because they are open shop projects, are also wavering in the numbers that they've been presenting to us over the last few months. So I think there's a whole host of strategies, and I would love to talk more. Maybe someone can ask another question around the DEI context that Chief Nguyen mentioned earlier is so critically important for us to really have a more inclusive work sites and job sites.
Thank you, JC. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Lujan. Councilor Anderson, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Sorry, Andre, if I didn't catch it, can you tell me what challenges specifically would you say that is the most hindrance right now for you to achieve these goals?
So I would echo some of the comments that Chief Nguyen made. I do think that, Chris, in talking about the distribution of work hours on BRJP projects, brings up a really excellent point, which is that 75% of the work hours that are performed by laborers for BRJP projects are performed by union labor. We have blanket goals for public and private projects, but without better insight into the demographics of union labor, it's very hard to tell whether or not the goals themselves are reasonable for those projects. And with 75% of the work hours for BRJP projects coming from union labor, the diversity there really does create a ceiling for the overall achievement of BRJP as a policy and an office. And I think that, the other team that I've been managing for the past 2 years is the supplier diversity team. And I think one of the ways that we've addressed our historic lack of understanding about the availability of MBE and WBE firms to perform work for city contracts is by performing a disparity study to better understand sort of the total marketplace, what percentage or share is made up of MBEs and WBEs, so that we can know, based on their share of the marketplace, what they should be expected to receive in city contracts. I think that we lack that level of understanding, especially given in the BRJP context, especially given, the cost of living in the city of Boston and larger labor market trends. I think that one of our barriers, both to setting expectations, but also in terms of focusing our efforts in places where we know there's work to be done and greater impact to be made, is understanding the state of the labor force in the New England area, particularly when it comes to union labor, but largely I think our work will always be to a certain extent prescribed by the state of the labor market and economic trends broadly. And I think knowing more about the ceiling on performance that's created by by that context would be really helpful. That's sort of a larger barrier. I think additionally, as we've moved from legacy technology to using software as a service, Salesforce, to do compliance monitoring for BRJP, I would echo Trin's comment that technology infrastructure is really important for doing this, because we are using a technology infrastructure to both collect data and report on data. But I also do want to point out that people are also really important for the effective use, maintenance, and long-term development of technology as an asset for local government. So I don't want, I want to sort of caveat Chief Nguyen's comment by saying that, without technical staff to support those technologies that we're using for these really important programs and projects, it's very hard to, over the long term, maintain that infrastructure in a way that allows us to be agile and quick in our ability to, in this context, provide data to the council or to whomever. So I would say that those are two barriers that, as I'm moving on from BRJP, I really think are top of mind for me. I hope that answers your question.
Andrea, it sounds like you were echoing me, but sure, echoing the chief as well. I wonder, though, have you had a conversation with the administration about this disparity study, and what exactly would it entail?
I think, Jody and I have talked a little bit about what the disparity study would look like in the context of in the sort of labor context. My experiences with disparity studies in the context of city contracting and business development specifically, as opposed to labor compliance and workforce development. I think, one of the things that a good place to start is to try and understand whether other states, cities in the country have successfully performed a disparity study in the context of employment standards and whatever local or state legal infrastructure.
Have you looked into that?
We have begun that process, although our focus currently, given the importance of stabilizing the technology infrastructure we're using to report, continues to be making sure that we
have the tech assistance,
but also move the data from the legacy systems that we were using to track compliance into the new ones, just so that we can report, cohesively on BRJP data for all BRJP projects, which we're required to do by the ordinance. So that's really been our focus. But I'm really hopeful in, Jody and my conversations that, the feasibility of a disparity study in this context is just definitely something that we're going to be looking into over the next months and thinking about FY24. So,
is it your recommendation, or have you had a conversation with the administration about it?
My recommendation would be that the feasibility of a disparity study in the context of employment standards and labor compliance be explored. I can't really speak to whether or not there are models out there that have effectively that have worked for proving and documenting a disparity in this context. In the context of MBE, WBE spending, part of the study requires an availability analysis, which in the context of labor would require knowing, especially for BRJP, what the total number of laborers that are Boston residents, people of color, and women are in the relevant geographic market area. And I think that type of a census, I just can't speak to the feasibility.
So what is the process? Not the feasibility, not the looking at best practices, but what is the process? Who do you talk to say, we need to look into this? What's the next step? Is it yourself? Is it someone else? Is it the mayor?
I think it would be something to continue dialogues with Chief Nguyen and Jody as the cabinet is fully formed at the end of the year. I think it would require an effort by a cabinet as opposed to just one department, given the scale of the effort that it would require.
And this was my point, right? That we go back and forth like this one-on-one, but that you had a perfect addition to my conversation with, when I mentioned the tech assistance with the data and all this other stuff, you had something to add. And had the format of this conversation been different, you would have said, also, this is what I recommend.
Yeah,
but sure.
I would say you're welcome. Thank you to to Andre, but I would say that because you all are working in collaboration, right, so that the same information you have should be the same that the chief has, right? So I think that if you're all having the same conversation and we're all in the same place, so I think, you know, I'm going to give you the opportunity the next time a question is asked specifically to Trin, and we know where time, and if you have something to add, you could inform her, or you could raise your hand and contribute to it, in the sake of just trying to keep the conversation going and being respectful of her time. So thank you for that. I'm going to go on to Councilor, and I also want to be mindful that it is Good Friday, and we still have one more panel to go, and the central staff, you know, today's Good Friday, so we were trying to close a little, you know, by 1, and so I just want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time here. No, it's all good. Everybody has their time, but we just gotta, like, you know, I try to be really patient, and sometimes, you know, it's just hard because you don't want to seem rude, which is the way normally those things come across. So you have the floor in 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panel again. My two questions just around data information is one, I know we're trying to increase diversity through the BRJP, but also I would love to make sure that we're addressing any income inequalities or disparities that are going on. So if we could, if possible, break it down, also this information on either by pay or pay grade or job titles by demographics, I think that would be important just to kind of identify if there's any other issues within these construction sites. And then the other thing is, I feel like we've asked this before, but just like a list of bad actors. You know, as district councilors, you know, most of these developments, they have to come through our office for, you know, approval or our letter of support. However, if we know those lists of bad actors, you know, this is something that we could continue to push those developers, encourage them to make sure that their workforce site is more diverse, right? And that they're centering BIPOC communities and BIPOC contractors. So those are the two things I just want to make sure that I put out there on the record.
That's a question that hopefully one of y'all can answer.
I can say that our office in particular is, there we go. Our office is very interested in trying to look at responsible contracting generally. So not just as it relates to the Boston resident jobs policy and performance there, but wage theft, health and safety, and ensuring that we're tracking those bad actors, because frankly, it also levels the playing field for those who are investing in ensuring pathways to training, health and safety, making sure they're paying fair wages, all of that. And I think that we definitely know and can look at, as Salesforce gets off the ground, to be able to run reports more by contractor so that we can better understand who those actors are. And
So we don't have a list that we could present of people not complying to the BRJP policy?
Well, I'll just say, given the aggregate performance of all contractors across all projects, it really does depend on how you define a bad actor. Because for Boston residents hours, for example, there are seldom projects that meet those goals. And so if the definition of a bad faith actor is not achieving the BRJP goals, the list is large. And that's why we use the compliance measures as sort of a balance, because also given the nature of the sanctions policy for BRJP, we would define, bad actors to obviously include poor performance on the BRJP employment standards, but also failure to work with our office to try and improve them. Right. So I think moving forward, potentially working with the council to determine sort of how we define bad actors for the purposes of promulgating that list, because I think right now, if we were to just go by the employment standards, even contractors that are doing a lot of good work to increase the number of Boston residents and women specifically on their projects are not at that 12% goal or at that 51% goal for Boston residents. And so I think trying to help determine where the threshold is would be important for that list to be, I think, helpful ultimately.
I mean, me personally, but I'll, also want to work with our co-sponsors. I mean, I would love to see the whole list and numbers that whether it's the residency side or, what puts them on that list. I want to see the numbers next to that as well. So, but I'm happy to talk to my co-sponsors on, creating that threshold, but I would love to see the whole list.
And I would echo what Jody's saying, that when we've successfully migrated all of the historical records of BRJP performance that were housed in a legacy database that we've now transitioned off of, one of the things that we will be able to do is to create essentially reports by contractor that includes their entire BRJP history, which will capture or which will really be able to provide a comparative mechanism between contractors to see, where, even if they're not meeting the numbers 51%, 40, 12 across the board, where some contractors are performing better than others.
Yeah, but through the chair, if I could get the whole list of all bad actors, I would love to see that, the entire list. But then also, are we able to do the breakdown by pay or job title for?
Chris, you could be able to speak. I mean, certainly by job title, because we have things broken up by the type of work that the laborer is performing on the project, but.
Job title, yes. Pay would be a little more difficult. The reason being is some jobs are not what we call prevailing wage jobs, so we don't track the hourly pay of those workers. So, but that would be, in terms of pay, hourly pay, it would be difficult. You wouldn't get a complete picture.
Okay, but we could get the job title and demographics.
We could get the job title and demographics.
Yeah, through the chair, if we could get that information as well. And I also believe, like in upcoming presentations, having that information part of the presentation will be helpful.
Yeah, and I just would like to add one more thing. So, I said this before, but, in terms of these numbers, we've seen, a lot of people have gotten opportunities and jobs because of this program, but, currently the way it is, the math just doesn't work. And when I say the math doesn't work, what I mean is there's not enough Boston residents to make every project, every contractor 51%. And the same goes for women, and probably the same for people of color, but you do see better numbers in the people of color category.
Yeah, and I understand Andre's talking about the disparity study that needs to be done to create the baseline, so definitely acknowledge that Andre did present that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Burrell. And I wanted to just, again, note for the record in terms of just timing, that I am going to stick to my little 5 minutes as well, just because I want to be respectful of the fact that we have a community panel that has been extremely patient, and we're almost going into a 1 o'clock hour here. So just really quick, I want to note for the record that I have in 2020, 2021, and 2022 have asked the same question in regards to the bad actors. And I understand and I appreciate Andre, kind of help pushing us to define what that looks like. I think that that's part of the conversation. But I am going to assume that we all know who are the people that are really showing up to support this work and who are the people who are not, right? And I think that that is easy. And and you all in previous hearings have named some of those folks who are not good actors. So I know that we have records of that somewhere, and you know who they are. The question is, why we keep letting them slide. Because I think rewarding bad behavior is not going to get us to where we need to be. So, according to the data, and I'm glad that Councilor Worrell asked about the earning for Black construction workers, were 24.6% lower than the median for white workers in the industry. And I'm just curious if the BRJP tracks those earnings. Did you know that? Did you know that that discrepancy exists, Mr. Brown?
I did not.
Does anybody know why that?
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is JC, if I can chime in on this one?
Yeah, please.
Yes. Those of us that are in the industry day to day, so I have a 25 plus year career in construction. It's no surprise to me that the data the metric that you just identified, that Black workers are at the lower end of the payment totem pole, so to speak. They are often, Black and people of color and women are often at the entry worker positions. and they are not able, for many reasons, to ascend up the ladder. And so that creates a challenge that there is a lot of disparity between the white workers that are in construction and have had long careers, and black workers that have shorter career lifespans and or just not in there. Part of this is due to the DEI issue that Chief Nguyen brought up, that there is a lot of tension on some of our construction sites, on most of our construction sites. Construction is an industry that it does have its natural rites of passage process that is making sure that people have the mental agility and the strength to push through challenges, because every project will have a set of challenges. And so it has a natural rites of passage process that is stressful. But on top of that, our black and brown workers and women sometimes really are faced with undue stress due to the racial challenges and pressure that they're put under. And so oftentimes they exit the industry. They don't stay within the industry for a long period of time. As Chief Nguyen mentioned just very briefly, she said, if you and I were in a position and we didn't like the values of the company, we'd leave that company. And so that is what happens. We don't have that. We also have a challenge that when our black workers or black and brown people of color are in construction and they finally are making a wage, they purchase homes outside of the city of Boston. They purchase outside of our city limits, which is making some of our numbers kind of go down in some ways. So there are some ways to incentivize the behavior that we want, but it's no surprise to me, being in the industry for as long as I have been, and being on the project sites that I see, and the ones that even within my own company, that the black and brown workers are at the bottom of the wage earning totem pole.
Thank you for that, JC. So this is my second question, and I only have a minute left, okay? So let's try to get through this. Of the top 150 projects in the last 5 years by hours worked, less than a third met racial equity goals. None met goals for women, and 3 projects met goals for city residents, according to the city data. And so I'm just curious, has there been any enforcement of compliance? And what are the actual sanctions? You talked about sanctions. I'd like, for the record, for us to specify what those are. And I'm just curious, what kind of outreach are we making to bring in more Boston residents into the trade? Aside from building pathways and job fairs, what else are we working with? And what type of collaboration efforts have been made to work with the trade unions?
So I'll speak to the sanctions first. Again, the Boston Employment Commission has the power to sanction contractors that are not compliant with the BRJP ordinance, but non-compliance for the purpose of the BRJP ordinance is determined by whether or not a contractor performs the 7 compliance measures that I spoke about earlier in the presentation. So those include attending BEC hearings, attending pre-construction meetings, but for the purposes of the sanctions that we recommended, submitting weekly payroll, which is the way that the BRJP monitors projects. We collect weekly payroll from contractors working on those projects that account for the hours worked by various laborers, some of them people of color, women, and Boston residents, and that's how we calculate the performance on BRJP in the aggregate. So in January of this year, our office recommended 3 projects for sanctions to the BEC, all of which were for contractors being out of compliance with the weekly payroll submission requirement of the BRJP ordinance. The commission determined that it would sanction 2 of the subcontractors on those projects that were out of compliance with the payroll submission requirement, and we are currently in the process of scheduling an appeals hearing because both of those contractors submitted appeals. That will likely be held at the beginning of May. As per the sanctions policy and the BRJP ordinance, any contractor that has been fined by the Boston Employment Commission has an opportunity to appeal that fine before the commission makes its final determination.
Thank you. Anyone else? Because I want to be mindful of my own time, so I'm not going to hog up space just for the sake of it.
Can I just say, I think it is important that the BEC cannot sanction for the contractor's actual hiring goals or inability to meet the hiring goals, but they could use that information when making the decisions about sanctioning, and did use that information when deciding which of the contractors presented should receive sanctions.
Thank you. Thank you, Jody. I'm going to move on to our next panel. I know we have, I'm not sure if we have public testimony. I see Priscilla here. Just wanted to know, Priscilla, if you signed up for public testimony. Okay, we want to make sure that we don't hold you hostage here. But I'm going to move on to the second panel in the interest of making sure that we are mindful of the time. It's 12:25, and really do appreciate the administration. And as you transition, hope you have a good Friday, and thank you for your hard work. We look forward to your partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do have 3 people signed up for public testimony. That's Mary Vogel, Nancy. So then who gave me the? No, some people, sometimes they use it as a sign. Okay. All right, guys, make your way to the hot seat. Thank you.
Good Friday and Good Friday.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye. We really do appreciate you all being so patient. Thank you so very much. As you know, this work is big, and so is the work that we all need to do to get there. So I really do appreciate your patience. I'm going to just dive right in. I'm going to, all of y'all gonna talk?
Yes.
Okay, all right, let me find out. Okay, so did y'all rehearse who's gonna be going in what order? Y'all got that?
We're good.
We're good?
How do you want to do it?
I'm gonna give y'all 20 minutes for your presentation. 5, 10,
Give me
15,
25.
25 minutes?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
25 minutes, and it's showtime.
Good afternoon, counselors, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak this afternoon about the BRJP policy and more specifically about the role of building pathways in creating greater diversity in our building trades unions. My name is Mary Vogel. I'm Executive Director of Building Pathways, and I've been working with the building trades as a labor attorney and then with nonprofits on workers' rights for 40 years. So I've been in this industry for a very long time. And Building Pathways, as you may know, was created back in 2011 through the project labor agreement that was referenced earlier. And it was that partnership between the Boston Housing Authority when Chief Wynn was there as a chief of staff who was instrumental in embedding in that project labor agreement a provision to create the pre-apprenticeship program. And the thrust, our mission is to create greater participation, retention, and advancement of women and people of color, disconnected young adults, and returning citizens, getting them into the building trades and keeping them in these family-sustaining careers. And for Building Pathways, we approach this work through a supply-demand strategy. So the supply side is the pipelines that we create, not only through our pre-apprenticeship program, but other efforts that I'll talk about. And then the demand side is making sure that there are public policies, such as the BRJP, and industry practices that support employment opportunities at the end of that pipeline and retention. And so I'll focus on 3 areas of our work. We have 5 pillars of work. I'll focus on 3 of those, and Nancy, Deputy Director of Building Pathways, will focus on the other 2. But, you know, the foundation of our organization has been our pre-apprenticeship program. We have been operating that program since 2011. We've had 470 plus participants. We actually have a class in session this week that Councilor Lejeune had the opportunity to visit the other day. And I would welcome counselors to come to our graduation next Friday between 11 and 1 at the Sheet Metal Workers. And see the energy and the enthusiasm which our participants have been involved in our program. We have, in our participant pool, we've had 90% people of color, 41% women. Our goal is to have 50% women, but so we have some work to do there. We have a graduation rate of over 90%, And we have a current placement rate of 83% in apprenticeship and industry-related employment, but we have about 20 people that are recent graduates that are in the application process to get into one of our union programs. So in addition to the 200 hours of training, both employability and occupational skills training that we provide case management supports, and the rubber meets the road, as everybody has said here, by getting our folks placed into a union apprenticeship program or other industry-related employment. And that, for example, we've had people go to the MBTA or National Grid or those kinds of occupations. I would say that, we have been recognized as a national model, and the success of that pre-apprenticeship program is largely due to the rich partnerships we have with the Greater Boston Building Trades Unions, our joint apprenticeship training programs, and our industry employers. We have an employer advisory committee of over 70 contractors that meet 3 to 4 times a year to inform our work. We attend the Boston Building Trades Council meetings to inform and work with the business managers to make sure we're meeting industry needs as well as community needs. And we also have a tradeswomen advisory committee to make sure our program is responsive to the needs of women in particular, which is the group that's least represented in the building trades. So we have a particular focus on getting more women, specifically women of color, into this industry. In addition to that pipeline, we have other pipelines that really focus on targeted communities. So I mentioned women. We have the Northeast Center for Tradeswomen's Equity program, which is designed to inform women career seekers across the Commonwealth about career opportunities in the union building trades. And I would invite you again to attend one of our monthly Tradeswomen Tuesdays in Boston, which is an opportunity for career seekers to hear from active tradeswomen about their experience in the industry and also to learn about the apprenticeship application process. The Northeast Center for Tradeswomen's Equity, we talk about making sure that women understand that these careers are available to them and that they can actually perform in this industry. So we are about to launch radio ads and public transit ads, again, to create the visibility that's needed to make sure that they appreciate that these careers are available. We maintain a database of women who contact the Northeast Center for Tradeswomen's Equity or attend one of our Tradeswomen Tuesdays. So we have over 2,800 women in that database, which dispels the myth that women aren't interested in learning about these careers. We also do a high school roadshow to Boston high schools and area high schools, and we have connected with over 1,000 young adults through the roadshow. I think, Nancy, we've probably been to 20 high schools this year alone. We also are co-sponsors of the Massachusetts Girls in Trades Initiative, which is a program that connects girls who are already in construction-related career technical programs with the union trades. And we hold an annual conference here in Boston at the IBW, which attracts about 600 girls and their educators as well as industry stakeholders, again, to make sure that they have a pipeline into the union building trades. And then, of course, we engage in the community-based career fairs, community fairs themselves, and we have a database of over 600 community-based and faith-based organizations that we send our information out to. Just recently, within the past couple of weeks, we went around to Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury, Hyde Park with Building Pathways staff as well as tradeswomen, and put door hangers on 350 businesses and residences, advertising our Building Pathways program and the Northeast Center for Tradeswomen's Equity. And the last pillar I'll talk about is the advocacy that we do. I said that's the demand side, making sure that we have public policies and industry practices that support diversity. And we work with what we call access and opportunity committees. We do have an AOC on the Winthrop Center project, and we have one on Suffolk Downs. So in addition to the compliance efforts that are run through the BEC, we have these other access and opportunity committees that are monitoring compliance with the goals in Boston or state goals. And we, through our policy group on tradeswomen's issues, which Building Pathways is a co-convener of, we have developed a manual of best practices for increasing the participation of women and people of color in this industry that I actually submitted written testimony, and the finishing the jobs best practices is attached to that testimony. So as the city, you can look at that finishing the job best practices to see what owners and developers should be doing to make sure we're reaching our workforce participation goals. That includes core crews. I say this every meeting I'm at the BEC, and I say it at our AOC meetings. You have to come to that job site with a diverse core crew to make sure that you set the bar for ensuring you're meeting those workforce participation goals for women and people of color. And also, we talked today at the previous panel about looking at a contractor's diversity history when you're bidding projects, or in the private side, again, when you're bidding projects, and that information is available to make sure that that contractor has a strong performance in those areas. And when we look at contractor performance, we use the HIP analysis. We're looking at the high-impact poor performers. So those are contractors with the most hours on the project who are poor performers. And then instead of being penalizing those contractors, sharing with them the best practices to achieve compliance. We try to be collaborative about this. And I would say I submitted with my testimony a study that we commissioned with some researchers out of MIT that looked at the BRJP data from 2013 to 2018. What was really a positive statistic that came out of that research is that of the hours worked by tradeswomen in Boston, over 50% of those hours are worked by women of color. And again, that, our approach is to really focus on that population. And I would leave you with another statistic. In Massachusetts overall, if you look at the Division of Apprenticeship Standards data, the union sector is at over 10.4% women in our union apprenticeship programs across the state, and 30% people of color. Those statistics are as of the end of 2021. We just got the information from DAS for 2022, so we'll be analyzing that as well. In 2012, the percentage of women in those programs was 4.9%. For the non-union sector, it's flatlined. They've made basically no progress over that period from 2012 through 2023. And I would also say that on the Encore Casino project, we had 497 tradeswomen work on that project, the largest number of tradeswomen on any single project in the US. So when you put your mind to compliance, both as having a public body overseeing it, as well as a robust compliance infrastructure on the project itself, we can reach these goals. And I think that's it. I will pass it off to Nancy to talk about our other two programs.
So hi everyone, my name is Nancy Luke. I'm the Deputy Director at Building Pathways. I just want to give some background to who I am and how I came into this role. So I have 25 years in the union labor movement. I first started working at Mascot with youth, and then... What'd you say?
So there's no way you're that old.
Thank you. So yeah, I first started working with youth, and then I worked with 1199 SEIU with healthcare, and now I'm at Building Pathways, and I've been here for a year. And so I've worked hard in the city I love to bring equity, resources, opportunity to my community. And I feel like Building Pathways is strategically placed, as am I, to help push what we want, right? To bring resources, opportunity, careers, to help our community thrive, right? Like Chief Wynn said, it's not just about a job, it's about a career, it's about a pathway forward. And at Building Pathways, we're trying to create different pathways forward for folks in our community to be a part of the union construction and the union building trades. So I feel like for everyone that knows me in this room, including some of the electeds, when I have a brilliant idea, I always reach out. I'm always one for a text, a call, an email to say, sorry to bother you, but I have an idea. And what I've experienced and what has been my experience with unions and with the building trades is when I have a brilliant idea and I reach out, they're like, how can we help? Never a bother. And so that's why we've seen over this last year how much we've grown in terms of outreach into the community. When we said, let's do a job and care fair, they're like, we'll be there. And having 12 out of the 17 trades there ready, and some of the training directors ready to take people in, it was just automatic. It wasn't a hesitation. When we do our Girls in the Trades conference every year, place is packed and filled with tradeswomen helping to support, helping them navigate to the different booths, and everyone's represented at the different booths. So my experience with the Boston Building Trades has been, let's figure this out, let's work on diversity and inclusion, let's support building pathways any way we can. And I know there have been several questions that have come up as I heard the first panel, right? Like, how do we work on access? How do we work on retention? And what you heard from Mary is that's what we're trying to do and that's what we're working on. And we're here to help partner with anyone that's willing to do the work with us, right? And so for us, we'll go anywhere. We will try to spread the word as far as we can. So in the last couple of days, talking to Suffolk County Jail, MCI about women that are returning to Boston and how we can get them in the trades. The housing developments, we blast things out. So we'll send to electeds, we'll send to constituency services, we'll send it to the Office of Black Male Advancement. Mary touched on our relationship with the Boston Housing Authority and how they've been integral in helping to support us. We also go into the community, so the Boys and Girls Club, the worker centers, recovery programs, women's shelters, anywhere that someone will say, like, will let us in, we will go to speak on our program, because we truly believe if women can see it, they can be it. And if the community knows we're here and it's an opportunity, then they'll take advantage of the opportunity. So in terms of retention, I feel like now that Building Pathways is like world known, everyone thinks that we're a large crew, but we want to make sure everyone knows we're small but mighty. And so we have a small staff of 5 doing this work, this critical work in our community. But we try to reach as many people as possible. And so in terms of retention, we create opportunities and spaces for women, for girls, for people of color, for current students and graduates to know that they can lean on us, support us, and we'll support them as they work to start their career in the union building trades and then find a path forward, like folks were mentioning in the previous panel, of needing a path forward in order to step up and have paths, a career, a long-sustaining career where they can move up. And so we make sure that there's a distinction for us between non-union and union construction. We make sure that folks know that it's not just about you and a job, but it's about our community and the opportunities and resources that a union construction job will bring for you, your family, and what you could then give back to the community. And it's also about making sure that we're there to support them. So one of the key things is, like, we want to make sure that there are no barriers. So we work on this issue with community, with labor, and one of our key things that we worked on, and with the council, is childcare. We know childcare is a huge issue in Massachusetts. We know it's really expensive in Boston. We know that if we want parents, single moms, who are the leading head of household in Boston to take advantage of workforce development opportunities, then we need to try to help to address childcare issues. And we work very closely with the City Council on bringing resources and non-traditional hours to childcare. And so in order for us to make sure that we work on wraparound services in childcare, that we bring women in and single moms in to workforce development, and then, like Trin said, that they're guaranteed and have a life-sustaining career, not just a one-off job, we partner with the building trades, with the union building trades, to make sure that happens. I think something else that's come up in the previous panel was around retention, diversity, making sure that folks see themselves in the leadership, making sure folks feel that they're welcomed in the culture. And so the second program that I help in spearheading is what we call Rise Up, which is our Respectful Workplace initiative, where we train, do workshops and sessions for construction, for unions, for pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs around shifting the culture for the construction industry. So I feel like my big ask for today is, how do we continue to move this work forward in a real way? How do we continue to partner with the city as we currently do, but also in different and new and innovative ways? I know that several city councilors, including Councilor Louis Jean, came to our Care and Jobs Fair and mentioned that, this is great, but we need to do more and do more directly in the community. And we said, and it's true for us today, we're here for it, we're ready to do it, where do you want us? So I'll pass it to the next speaker.
Hi, thank you so much for having this. I'm always very excited to talk about my work. And I am very passionate about the recruitment, retention, and advancement of people who look like me in my community. So I'm just really excited to be here today and talk about that. My name is Shamia Turner, and I am the Business Development Representative for the Northeast Regional Council of Sheet Metal Workers. So not just Boston, but that covers all of the New England states. I also am the a trustee on the Recruitment and Retention Council for our international union, as well as the secretary for our International Women's Committee. I grew up in Dorchester. I graduated from Boston Public Schools, and thank God I own a home in Boston, which is not easy to do, but thanks to my career, I've been able to afford that. I actually started working in construction when I was 18 years old. I took a gap year before college, and I worked for Habitat for Humanity. And then when I was in college, I went to school in New Orleans. The hurricane came through, and I found myself, instead of going to classes, helping people with their homes. And I've always had a passion in construction. When I got up to Boston, I did try to apply for several jobs. I didn't know anything about the unions. I did try to apply for several jobs. I either got rejected or told to go work in an office somewhere. And the closest I got was working for a landscaping company, which didn't pay me very well and paid me in cash, so basically under the table. And I found myself working in the service industry. I was a bartender, server, hostess, and I was getting really scared about saving money, having health care, and then saving for retirement. So when Building Pathways came along, it was actually, I always describe it as a lottery ticket for me, which is maybe dramatic, but that's how I take it, because it's provided me with such a big launch pad since then. I was in cycle 2 in 2012, so I've been a sheet metal worker for around 11 years. And I do want to just touch a little bit on the apprenticeship process. And I understand the frustration around changing the culture and why it takes so long, but our apprenticeship process for the sheet metal workers is 5 years long. And so especially after you get out of your time, that's when you're eligible to start to run or be appointed for these high levels of positions that I am right now. So it does take a little bit of time to get rooted in the union and learn the process and create connections so that you can ascend to these positions. I also want to let you all know that I'm an introvert at heart, but once I became part of the union, I noticed how much opportunity and political access there was. And I've always been very passionate about bringing resources back to my community. And I shared with you, Counselor, the other day when we spoke, and also Counselor Fernandez-Anderson, who's not here right now. I got a chance to meet with her, and I'm looking to meet with everyone because I consider the position that I have a resource to bring back to my community and to continue to recruit, retain, and advance, again, people who look like me. But since I've been in the union, I've been able to access leadership in the field. I've been a sub-foreman. Before I took this position, I was on my way to be a foreman. I decided that I would have more impact where I am. Even within the company, so the company that I work for is called Canistraro. They're a large mechanical company in Boston. I pushed and was part of their diversity, equity, and inclusion task force. And so they implement they have implemented and are continuing to implement a program like that within that company. And I was able to start a women's affinity group there so that the women in the company will have their voices heard and let people know that they want these foreman positions, that they should be considered for them. And the response to that has been very good. Even nationally within my international union, I've been able to connect there because Building Pathways sponsored me to go to Trade Women Build Nations, which is the largest construction conference in the United States, and it is just for women. And I was able to connect with other women across the country who are in these positions that we want people to be in. And actually, right now, one of my mentors, Leah Rambo, who is a sheet metal worker out of New York, she's actually the deputy director at the Department of Labor. And even in this past year, several of us on this panel have met the president. I got a chance to introduce Vice President Harris at the Sheet Metal Workers Hall. Just yesterday, we were at a roundtable with Senator Markey talking about all the money coming down from the federal level and how it should be disseminated. And by the way, a lot of that money, there are heavy tax incentives to use union labor. So it's a missed opportunity to not partner with us and figure out how to get more people into these good paying jobs that are careers and will bring more money back into our community. And I'd also like to say that many Building Pathways graduates have been elected or appointed to these union leaderships, and a big part of that is the network of support that we are afforded. And so, well, actually, before I get to that, and I also want to highlight that I don't know the specific numbers. Private companies are not compelled to collect this data, which is part of the problem. I mean, it's collected voluntarily, so you can look at demographic data on the Department of Labor website or the Department of Apprenticeship Standards, but I can just tell you what I see. So when I started with the sheet metal workers in 2012, there were 5 women. I know that because I specifically looked for them, and it was really hard. Now there are 35 women, and we have a pretty robust women's committee. We are all there to support each other, and having that visibility makes all the difference in the world. And the infrastructure for tradeswomen exists in the city of Boston. It's very strong. We were able to do the Women Build Boston conference last October. I was one of the co-chairs for that committee. We had around 700 women show up from around the state. What I would ask is that we tap into the city resources, such as the Office of Black Male Advancement, and start to galvanize the men in these industries, because it is still male-dominated, but galvanize the men in these industries to run for these elected positions or to be more involved so that they can get noticed and be appointed to these positions. And that's when you'll really start to see things change. I am so excited to work with you all around that. I've done a lot of work, especially in terms of women in the state and nationally. So I have a lot of resources, a lot of good ideas, and I hope that you all reach out. I will definitely reach out to you, and I would love to partner. And with that, thank you so much for your time.
Amazing.
All right, Auntie.
Go ahead.
My name is Shaton Green. I'm an agent for the Greater Boston Building Trades Unions. That's where I am now. That's not where I started. Very interesting. Coming in the elevator, I bumped into somebody who I met in Dorchester Court who gave me the word on Building Pathways that was the thing that changed my life. And it's kind of crazy that I come here and I see him as I come up the elevator, which really reminded me that as much as I love this work, it's our stories that are special and that really resonate with people in our communities. I know for a fact that, you know, by me going through my apprenticeship, going through my pre-apprenticeship into my apprenticeship and then becoming licensed in my trade, a lot of people in my family and my community witnessed that and was just like, how can I do that? And I'm like, you can do it because it's very possible. I came from this and the pathway that Building Pathways helped to create, which we are all still closely connected with, and giving back is very huge to us. I don't think that we can even move forward if we don't give back. Economically, I was supposed to fail. That was a fact. I kind of counted my own self out until I found out the information about unions and what they can do to provide these changes in your life. Even with having items on your record and stuff like that, you're still able to make exactly what someone else who doesn't have that on their record. So, being able to experience raises and fair pay and great things, pensions and annuities is just something that is felt like more like a bonus. It felt like, wow, do I deserve this? But the answer is yes, and we're here to share that with everybody. My career started, and I remember my first day working on in UMass Boston. And I was just looking out at the water like, wow, I can't believe I'm on a union job site. I never thought that I could be here, but I'm here now. And the question started to resonate, how'd I get here? How'd I get here? What was it that was written for me to be here? And honestly, the language in the project labor agreement is so strong that it actually requires every hour worked on that job is going towards your apprenticeship. It's going towards you making more money. These raises through collective bargaining, all we really have to do is show up and work, which is the amazing thing. And bargaining and just that element of collective bargaining, I worked non-union and I had to call and beg for each dollar in my check. It wasn't given, and it wasn't a collective bargain as well. So even the guiltiness of receiving a dollar and someone else who works next to me doesn't receive that dollar also, it really didn't sit right for me. But in a union setting, that doesn't happen, and I'm so grateful and thankful for that. We represent over 35,000 members and over 12,000 with them being residents, and we want to keep these good jobs in our neighborhood. I guess I'll say, as an axe is, for support, I ask help with programming, policy, and initiatives because, you look at building pathways as something small, but like Nancy said, mighty. But there's a bunch of other programs that come from that, which is Build a Bright Future, which people that don't even go through Building Pathways could log on to that website and still get information about different careers that you could have within the trades. Boston Union Trade Sisters, which is a support group of sisters who really stick together and work through adversity that they may face on job sites and stuff like that. So which also helps with retention. Building a Stronger Boston, which is a union community voice, which is very much needed to fight off bad developers that come in and they want to undermine our communities. So, Building a Stronger Boston is that voice to again just let those values in the community be known: family-sustaining careers, environmentally conscious construction, the highest safety standards, equity through union contract, and it all comes from responsible development. But if we don't hold people to those standards, they'll definitely come in to undermine it, and that's why we're here as the Boston trade unions to protect those values and to also let people know that everyone should have access to these opportunities. We are here to help shift the culture, change the culture in the direction that we want to see it. And like I said, there's no way that we can move forward without giving back. It's just not in us. And I'm not sure the total number of graduates, but I bet you every graduate has brought another one through the program. So even though we're small, we continue to be mighty, we continue to grow. And like I said, there's so many other programs that come off of Building Pathways out of inspiration that we can also use help with getting the word out. So thank you very much. I'll pass that to Manny.
How you doing? As you'll notice, the difference from me to my peers out here is I don't have nothing written. What I'm going to say comes from my heart. At the end of the day, it's my truth.
Make sure the mic, because we want to hear all that.
Okay,
So there we go.
It's my truth. It's my testimony, right? Building Pathways, what it's done for me. First, let me say thank you, Mary. for creating such a program. I know you and Marty Walsh did a lot for that, but the sustainability that I have to provide for my family, kind of coming through there was major. I came from Goodwill. I actually worked at Goodwill for quite a long time. I don't know if you know Avery Perry and Madre good friend of mine, good people that I met through my path. I was actually a job coach. Very rewarding job. Helping people out was a passion, but human service does not pay the bills. I got fired during the recession. Got let go, not fired. Although my beef was, I was very boisterous. I fought for not only the clients that were there, but for my peers. So they let me go. And during that time, I was unemployed. But before that, when I was there, the time for raises came, and they wanted me to self-evaluate myself. And coming from where we came from, to evaluate yourself, we're the first to beat ourselves up. Why? Because that's what we're taught. Everything from schooling on down, we're taught to, if you're not doing it right, it's wrong. And it's just that simple. So why even bother with any of that, right? Well, they were only trying to offer me, at the time, from a $1 raise, they said, we can give you 50 cents. 50 cents. The cost of living went up easily $2, and you're giving me 50 cents. Okay. I take it on the chin, I walk away. They let me go. I'm unemployed. Here comes, like I like to describe it as the scene from Forrest Gump, where the feather's coming down. Well, it was a leaflet from Building Pathways. It kind of came down from the sky, and it landed on my feet. And so I read this leaflet, and it's asking me, do I want to make 6 figures? And I go, yeah. Do you want a career? And I go, yeah. You know, I'm tired of jobs. And well, here we go. I go to it, that very same day that leaflet landed on my feet was the orientation. And I showed up to the orientation. And the energy there was major. But again, I had no clue of what I was getting myself into. And then I made it to the next step, which was assessment. And during assessment, I'm sitting there with a couple of buddies, and we're talking about it, and people that I haven't seen in a while, and we're talking about this opportunity that may come. Then here comes interview day, and a good buddy of mine, who I won't bring up, is sitting there. And we get to talking, and the conversation just led into a point where he goes, you're a fighter. I go, am I? I know I fight, right? But I don't know what kind of fighting you're talking about. Well, he's talking about my spirit. He's talking about the energy that I bring to certain situations. I'm thinking he's talking about slugging it out, but either way, a fighter's a fighter. And he goes, whatever comes from Building Pathways, whether your interview goes well or, you know, you're in or you're out, you're in some type of union. Just know that. Well, it so happens that I did get in Cycle 5, where me and Shaitan came from. This is 11 years ago? 11 easy? I know you came Cycle 2. Those bottom cycles are major. I'll tell you that much. Those first 5, I like to call them the mighty fist, right? You take those 5 cycles, we become a mighty fist. And as you see the product here. Well, I get in, and I get into the trade of my choice. Out of all the trades you're able to get into, I mean, I could have gone easier, maybe gone excavators, right? I could have probably gone more money and gone for elevators. I chose plumbing. Why? Because they say if you enjoy what you do, you're never working. It's never work. And every day I went to work and plumbed and looked back at what I did and was amazed. I'm building Boston, right? So one of the sayings I have, I came from building pathways to now building a stronger Boston. So again, I do all that and I give back. I start showing up to my union meetings. I come to meetings where they're talking about potential projects that are coming through the BPDA, and I voice myself not only as a union worker, but what it's going to bring to my community, right? The jobs that it could bring. So I get involved, and it's getting noticed through my union. Wow, you know, we didn't ask you to be at this meeting. Why are you here? It's my community. I'm involved. Here comes some time later, and they asked me if I want to interview for organizer. I didn't say yeah immediately. I'm 10 years in. Do I know this? Do I know it enough? Do I know my trade enough that I can represent for my union? I take the interview. I get the position. Just like Shamia said, at that moment I realized what I have, the opportunities that I'm going to be able to give to people who look like me, to people who live in my community. My hairs are rising right now because it's where my heart is, right? And sometimes your heart can be in the right or wrong place, right? But I know what I have and how I need to utilize that. Again, I could only make things happen with people like them. You know, me being able to go to the classes and speak and see the one-on-ones. We speak about retention, and it always reminds me about the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's such a true statement to our community. I can tell people about what I do for a living, but unless they're willing to put that hard work in, it's not going to happen. Some of them get afraid. They don't know what hard work is. They don't know what it is to ask for $1 and get told you're worth 50 cents. I get 2 raises a year. I don't ask for them. During my apprenticeship, oh boy, 2 raises a year and a bump up for every year that I was learning and earning. I haven't bought a house. I'm looking yet. I'm looking. I would love to stay in Boston, but there's things that are hints in there, right? I mean, why not give my kids a huge yard to run around in? If I stay in Boston, that becomes a lot smaller. It's all way. That's my personal thing right now. But I just needed to share my testimony with y'all. And the last thing I'll say as far as numbers go, statistically, I'm not supposed to be here talking to y'all. Mm-hmm. Through numbers, I was never supposed to make it to the age of 18. That's right. Yeah, I try to leave that there. But I wasn't supposed to make it, and every year past that was a blessing. Losing kids now. Again, me being an organizer, I'm able to go to high schools and share the information that was not shared to me. I'm able to do that. The energy, just yesterday, a young man over in Quincy High, his goal is to be a designer of an architect, yes, along those lines. That's his dream. And I say, well, have you ever thought about plumbing? Because not only do we show you how it works, we have those abilities to give you that. After the conversation, he goes away. I was leaving to go to our open house where we allow anybody to come in and get the information about our local. And he stops and he goes, listen, I just need to say that after talking to you, my mind has changed. I go, what do you mean? Chase your dreams. I'm never telling you not to chase your dreams. What I'm saying is that this will be sustainable. And I just needed to share that information with you. And he goes, yeah, but now I'm just considering this. And I said, well, you have my number. Let's talk more. Because I don't want you to give your dream up. But I just want to let you know that you can make a great living. You know, the 40 years that these kids could put in, they'll be millionaires. If they budget correctly, multi-millionaires from working with their hands. And that's my testimony, my truth. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Yes, okay, we can do this in my chamber.
Thank you.
No, for real, seriously. Sometimes we get so caught up in protocol and parliamentary procedures that we forget to be human, right? When we walk into these spaces, right? Everybody's like, oh, I'm being like this.
Numbers,
No, not with me. Like, I really want people to be here, at least when I'm chairing situations, to be your full selves, because we have been asked to leave ourselves at the door in every space that we walk into. And I even struggle being here and trying to be my full self because, like you know, I wasn't supposed to be here either. And the odds are always against people who have had to fight to get into every space. And so when we get in there, we have to show up in a way that is respectable, and we want to try to stay in. But you know what? I don't have time for that. So I want everybody here to be their full selves. And let's not even try to be politicians, okay? So let's just be in this space and know that the work that we're trying to do here is not about us. It's about the people that we're trying to impact. And what happens is in politics that people want to move in ways that it's all about what's going to make the most sense for them. But we don't got that. It's quite obvious through your journey and what you shared here that you are being led by heart, right? And sometimes that heart work changes everything. And I think it's really important to uplift and to thank you all for bringing your full selves into the space and helping people understand what your journey has been and why your journey is so important to this conversation. So thank you for that. Thank you. So in the interest of just making sure that it is still Good Friday, yo, just so y'all know, I'm gonna have my the lead sponsor of this start off with her questions.
Thank you, and I want to thank all of you for being here. You know, this started with me coming to check out a training session about HAZWOPER, and leading to this beautiful panel of folks coming to share your testimony. And I just want to thank you for being here, and I'm just so excited for all the work that we have to do. Councilor Rowell, who has also worked with me a lot and on issues of job training, on issues of getting out in our community, had to leave, and so he wanted to just let you all know that he's committed also to this work. I wanted to say that obviously we're here, and having Building Pathways here is incredibly important because we are the reason that we want to center unions in this work and center them in discussions of BRJP, because unions are standing in that gap between people and those who have the power. And so we are making sure that unions are centered in discussion because you all are the ones fighting for family-sustaining wages, for being able to retire with dignity, being able to have a family-sustaining career, health benefits, the basics that every person should have. And so when I think about championing the work of unions, it's about championing economic justice, about creating the futures that we want to see, which is why when our unions aren't as welcoming to Black and brown folks, to women, we want to do everything we can to push against that and to make them more inclusive, because the work of unions is one of economic justice, and the work of economic justice is one of racial justice. And so I am so glad to see all of you here for the work that you are doing on behalf of unions. I look at all of you and the work and your presence in these spaces as reparative. The work should have been there a long time ago. Should have been people of color as organizers a long time ago, as business managers, business representatives a long time ago. And your presence here now, I celebrate, and we should all celebrate, but should have been a long time ago. And so I know that you all carry, because of what this meant for you, carry this incredible weight on your shoulders of like, how do we open this door for a lot more people? And I'm a Black girl from Mattapan with a Harvard Law School degree. Okay, whenever I walk into a school, I think about how do I make sure that I'm not an anomaly, because I should not be an anomaly. And my presence there was not any sort of tokenism. It's reparative for all of the Black women that were excluded from these halls of power. So I want you all to understand that your presence is reparative and that your presence is needed and should have been there long ago. So for anyone to feel anything other than I'm here and I should have been here 20 years ago, I just need everyone to know that. And I say that too because I am so glad that all of you are here, and I'm so glad that I believe, Mia, you also represent senior leadership, but we also want senior leadership to know that the weight that you carry should be shared by everyone in senior leadership in our unions to really lean into this work, because you can't do it alone. And whenever we're having a conversation about DEI, it's okay, let's hire a DEI person and that person. And I think that we need to hire more DEI people in all of these spaces, but also realize that everybody in senior management needs to carry this work with them. So I just wanted to say that because I think it's a incredibly important table setting. And then I wanted to just dive into a few questions I have. Mary B, again, that training was really wonderful for me to attend, and being able to talk a little bit after with Nancy and Lindsay about the stats are really great, was a really good opportunity. I think you said that there's an 83% retention, 83% placement. And that's both in apprenticeships with unions and adjacent jobs. Do you have a breakdown between, like, of that 80%, like what is the actual percentage that is going into union apprenticeships, and then the percentage of that going to like adjacent jobs?
You're good. Okay, now I'm good. We're looking at that data now, but it appears to be about 80% of the placements are in union apprenticeships. Now, we've had people placed in the Teamsters, which was not an apprenticeship program, but is a union building trades. We've had a placement in Iron Workers Local 501, which is not an apprenticeship, but it is a trade. So we've had those sort of placements that are not strictly building trades, except for the Teamsters, of course. But and then, as I mentioned, MBTA, National Grid, and we've actually had some folks go non-union, just a handful.
Thank you. I think I think I said this to you. I've said this before. It's incredibly important for us to be looking at the data and building on it, so that we know where the gaps are. I also just wanted. I was just really moved by being in the classroom on Monday, by hearing the students and a lot of them telling about how they heard about it. And it seems like a lot of it, Shaitan, right now, to what you were saying, a lot of it is word of mouth right now. You don't go forward unless you're pulling back, which is important. And think about the number of graduates every year is about how many?
Well, we enroll now that I wouldn't say post-COVID, but now that, the COVID is somewhat behind us, we're back up. This current class is 18. So it's typically 15 to 18, but we strive for 18. Per class.
And
we do
three
classes per year, 2 daytime and 1 evening Saturday class.
Great. And the unions are accepting more than, there are probably 200. How many apprenticeships throughout the building trades?
Well, there are 17 apprenticeship programs, and some of them are, I think there was a statement made about the unions not being present in Boston, but many of them have
halls,
training program. Their halls are here and their training programs are here as well. So it depends upon the trade, how large they are. They all vary by, the size of their necessary workforce. The IBW, the carpenters and laborers are the largest, and then the other mechanical trades are a little less. I know that, do you know how many the sheet metal workers?
There's about, so Local 17 that's in Boston covers a large area, that's based in Boston, so it covers New Hampshire and Rhode Island too. So in Boston, we have a couple hundred. Across the whole sector, we have maybe 1,200.
Okay. Yeah. And so I guess to me, the one, I think I spoke to you about this, and this is my last, not even question, Chair, is one of scale. Yeah. So if we have 200 or 300 plus apprenticeships that are happening in a year, and we have about 30 or so, and we realize how big this problem is and how great the work that you're doing, from what I've been able to see, my constant communication with all of you, and how it is what we're leaning on primarily to help diversify the trades. I always, as I asked on Monday, have a question about scale. Is there more that we can be doing or scaling to really realize to live up to the challenge?
Well, part of it is financial capacity. We're at our financial capacity right now in terms of the numbers of cycles and the number of students. And in addition, I would just reiterate the other pipelines that we've created. So in addition to the pre-apprenticeship program, we have our Northeast Center for Tradeswomen Equity Program, and then our MAGIT program and our other outreach just to educate people about these career opportunities. Because not everybody, if you know what trade you want to go into and you have, some foundation in construction, you may not need a pre-apprenticeship program. We certainly give folks a leg up because we have that rich partnership with our building trades, but our pre-apprenticeship program isn't the only pipeline. That's why we've expanded into other, areas to make sure that we're at least educating people about these career opportunities. If they, most people know about the trades that are in the residential market, a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, but they may not know about the other trades, and that's what we really commit to doing, is educating people about those other opportunities.
And if I could if I could just add on to that, I think education and access to this information is very important, because most of these unions, if you want to apply directly, you got to know when they're accepting and when that deadline is. So that alone, even if you're skilled and talented, if you don't got that little piece of information, you can't even apply directly. So I would ask for us all, which we do, but to keep on growing. That when you get this information, to share with as many people as possible, because that can save a life. And there's people that can apply directly and skip the whole Building Pathways program. For me, I looked at it like a college decision. And Building Pathways helped me basically kind of figure out which union that I wanted to do for the rest of my life, instead of just going with whatever was available. But if there's people that are ready to just jump in and they kind of already got a heads up on what they want to do, we can get them that information to where they can apply directly too. So there's many ways and many paths, but access to the information and education around it is, I think, we all need to build upon and work together.
Yeah, just to add to Mary and Shaitan, I think we are so focused on getting into the high schools, both the career technical high schools, but also just the high schools. That's why our high school roadshow, like if they're doing life after high school, if they're even doing college fairs, we'll ask to table. If they want us to come in and do info sessions so that they have like a face or a resource to know that this opportunity exists, will come. And then I know we talk about it, but maybe we need to explain more with our Mass Girls and Trades Conference, the idea that girls that are in the technical high schools also know that they should be applying and thinking of the union programs. And because sometimes it's just like, okay, whatever company or construction company that's affiliated with the school or has an in with the school is who gets in front of them. And we want to make sure that they know they could have a long life-sustaining career. So and this is like, it's not just through the schools, right? Because like I said before, we're trying to figure out like returning citizens. So anyone that's willing to talk to us and think through it with us, we're willing to figure out like, how can we get in front of your people? How can we support them in this process? How can we make sure that they know that this is a viable possibility for themselves?
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony.
Can I add one more thing? Thank you. So on an organizing level, so there have been many people that have been organizing to the sheet metal workers, and Manny could probably speak to this too, people who already have their licenses, who are already licensed sheet metal workers, who have been working non-union. And especially when there's a lot of work, which there has been in the past couple of years, these people can skip the whole apprenticeship process altogether. So I've worked with a number of men who've come in. They may have done like a year or two of apprenticeship, or they just journeyed out already, and were able to just take these jobs. And I always ask them, why did you decide to go union now? One man, he's in his early 50s, and he was just like, man, I wish I would have done this a long time ago. I was working non-union, I was making $22 an hour. I've been doing that for 25 years, and like, I need benefits. I won't be able to get my full retirement, but he wanted the benefits, and that's why he came. But so there are a lot of stories like that as well.
Touch on that.
Y'all lucky it's Good Friday, because I'm just letting y'all
just letting you know it's Good Friday. one of my experiences just out in the field, like she says, I run into this young kid, and he goes, "Oh, I've been waiting on you guys." He had no clue of how to get into the union. Like that information is just not being sent out there. And again, it's just one of those things that I was just eye-open. That information, again, I definitely love the whole high school aspect, the building pathways. That's just where my heart is. I just wanted to share that one thing.
Thank you. Councilor Louis-Jean, we're good? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have a few questions too, just because, you know. So I wanted to just uplift the fact that when I was at Goodwill, I experienced what they call a cliff effect. So I was making 6 figures. I used to work at MTV. I was making really good money. I ended up becoming pregnant, and I had to literally start from scratch all over again. And I ended up at Goodwill making less than what I probably was making what I made when I got out of college. Because you're right, human services don't pay much. And working with women who were transitioning out of DTA, I shared my experience around that. And so I want to uplift the importance of, when we're thinking about building pathways, that we're also thinking about people who are in their late age or a little older, right? Because not everybody's just going to be a teeny bopper up in here. So I just want to make sure that I'm so glad that that pamphlet just fell out of the sky. Because it is like trying to crack the Da Vinci Code when we're thinking about entering the trades, because it's all in who you know. There's still that element there, despite how many efforts that you make, right? It's sometimes it's an industry of privilege, right? It's a hand-me-down. You know, my uncle was, my cousin was, my grandfather was, my great-grandfather was, everybody in your family was, except black and brown people, right? So as you all continue to have these conversations, really, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the culture and the climate in which we're sending people into when there is that climate and culture situation, which, again, this is about being honest and real, because whether you're going to tell me or not, I've heard it. So I just want you all to be fully expressed here.
If I may. So I appreciate the way that you even started this whole thing by saying honesty and vulnerability, because my experience has been very real, and I've been put in very vulnerable situations, and that's the honest truth. Part of my mission, going through certain experiences in this field, knowing that this is a good job and that many more people need to have access to it, is to change the culture. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing that at all levels. So, like I said, locally and across the international union that I belong to. We recognize that there's sexism, there's racism, and that all needs to be addressed so that people, just as the woman who was listening, and I can't remember her name right now, JC, she had expressed, you know, when people are confronted with those problems, they will leave because they don't deserve to be treated that way. They deserve to be treated as human beings. So I'm never going to argue with those problems. They exist. And so the biggest part to me is that network. So in the past, it's been nepotism. Being part of Building Pathways was like us having a connection. That was our connection in. So Marty was a huge connection. Marty Walsh was a huge connection. And when we get on the job sites, one of the first questions that I've always been asked is, who do you know? I'm like, I know Building Pathways, I know Marty, you know, I'm here to work. You know what I mean? And then even seeing that kind of inequality on the job sites, I've always encouraged people, and I've always been the person to be like, look, that's not equitable. Like, he came in late too, so we need to have consequences all the way around, or whatever it is. So I don't think we're ever going to argue with that, but we are here to address that and change that and make sure that the culture meets our needs so that people stay and can advance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely want to acknowledge that, you know, we have been through some things. You know what I mean? Me coming in, the union for me was a life changer. So sometimes I would, you know, basically, not everyone has that experience that we're talking about. Not everyone has that experience. But what I've noticed is that what can help combat these things that we battle every day are mentorships in relationships and feeling like you can speak up and voice your opinion and without any consequences of being fired. So that right there, which we are all becoming mentors to people that are experiencing certain things, and now they have us to talk to about it and release that. Sometimes without that release, it starts to affect how you work, and then it creates a trickle effect. So just addressing that as quickly as possible, knowing that you have an outlet and building pathways. There's times where, you know, coming up as an apprentice, I came back to Building Pathways and say, I need help with that. But thinking about if I didn't have that to go back to and ask for help, what would I do? And we don't want to leave people in that vulnerable position, especially not knowing what they might be going through. So mentorships is really huge, and that's why I talk about the Boston Union Trade Sisters. I'm not allowed in that group, but they have it. They have it, and it exists, you know, to bring up issues, to talk and come together in solidarity, so that we can continue to make great money, great wages, and support our families in ways that we never thought before. So, like I said, not everyone has that experience. But people who have experienced that, we can talk about it in a way where it can be healthy and we can actually grow. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, I always talk about the fact that my mom is 74 years old now and is still too poor to retire because she's never had union representation, right? So we could have these hypotheticals, right? But there are people who right now, and we tried to unionize, Unite 26, I think it was 2010, 2011, that we were trying to get BAPS into it's the dining hall to become unionized. But the employees were nervous. And my mom was going at it. You know, my mom doesn't even have health insurance, you know, like benefits, like real benefits, right? So 74 years old and barely making now at least probably like $23 an hour, and she's been there for 20-something years. So when you talk about unions, right, there are some people who see me as more of a critical friend because I'm always going to keep it 100. I love that. But that's just who I am, and I would rather have your relationship than your endorsement, right? Because then I can keep you accountable, right? But it's people like my mom that remind me of why you all are so important in the ecosystem. Because right now my mom should be retired. Yes. But she can't afford to. Yes. Right? And so, and you and I probably had a very different experience if we were at Goodwill and we were unionized. We'd probably still be there. I left there too, right? Because I wasn't earning my potential. But I had to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. At 8 o'clock, clocking in. Until 4 o'clock, clocking out. Like, you treated me like I was some union worker, but you weren't giving me those union benefits, right? So I think that when we're thinking about this discussion, right, there's just so much layers to it when we're really thinking about equity that we get so caught up, right, in just the politics of it. But at the end of the day, we're not going to get to where we need to be unless we're all having the same conversation. So the administration needs to come in here, right, and say, here's 3 things that y'all need to do. You all should be able to say, here's 3 things that the city needs to do. Because it's everybody. And here's 5 things that the city councilors should do. Not just show up and look cute, which I do. And I go to all of the things that you all invite me when you do invite me. And if you don't have my email address, just in case, Mary, it's julia.mejia@boston.gov so that you can invite me to some of these other things that y'all are doing. Because I am a critical friend. I mean, it's okay to have critical friends, right? But for me, it's really about how do we hold ourselves accountable, realizing that it's not about us, it's about the people that we're here to represent, that we have to center. You want to say something?
Yes. I am happy to have you both as critical friends. You guys have showed up and showed out for us in terms of supporting Building Pathways with Care That Works. We look forward to partnering with you. Thank you for creating the space for us to talk about our experiences, what we're doing, how we're moving forward. And hopefully this isn't, like, the hearing isn't the end of us figuring out how to move forward in a real way. We understand and acknowledge that there have been problems, that there are gaps, that we need to do better, but we want to do better in partnership with the community, with the city council, with local government. And so unions want to make sure, Building Pathways wants to make sure we're here to do the work.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. I appreciate that. And I think that, as I continue to navigate the world of politics here, I am so incredibly grateful that I can be who I am and stand on my own 2 feet and know that, I can work in partnership with folks and not be afraid, and which I think is one of the things that you all have to do every single day when you have to hold your own colleagues accountable to how they're showing up or how they're not showing up for people, right? And I think that it is so taxing to always have to be that voice of like, y'all are not doing right by X, Y, and Z. It's a lot, but if not you, then who?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's what I'm so incredibly encouraged by. It is really looking at the leadership that is in this chamber right now and how you are holding yourselves accountable to this moment. And that is what I'm extremely encouraged by, because people, it doesn't matter, it does matter who's in leadership, but if the leadership is not going in with heart and ready to do that work, it's just, a title for a title, but I hear it in your voices, I hear your journey, and I'm incredibly encouraged about what the possibilities are going to look like in the building trades. I'd love to see it be browner and blacker and more women, okay? And I'm going to hold you all accountable to that. And I want to be a partner with you all in helping you get there. And because I'm the chair of workforce development, employment, and economic empowerment, I have a responsibility in making sure that whatever I can do to help you close that gap, that I hold myself accountable and that I'm not just here giving you all lip service either. So I need you all to tell me what I need to do to support you. Okay? You got something to say?
Yeah. So yes, we appreciate critical friends. I mean, it's not a real friend if somebody's not going to tell me my hair is messed up or whatever it is, And thank you. And part of being in a union is the same as being in a democracy. We're supposed to speak up. Mm-hmm. What makes it easier for us is that network of support, and it is a heavy burden. I'm the youngest, only Black person, only woman in my leadership body. That's heavy. But I can call these dudes, I can call these ladies here, and we can strategize. We can get a plan going. We can figure it out. And so it's only in our best interest that we have more people to add to that and to lift to pick up the burden. You know what I'm saying? So I really appreciate it. I hope I can speak on behalf of everybody else. But like I said, I'm so excited. I'm always excited to talk about this, and I cannot wait to work more with you all.
And the thing that makes me really proud about our Building Pathways participants and our graduates is that, yes, they are committed to their unions, but they are committed to their community.
That's right.
And you've heard this over and over again. And so I think that's what's going to get us into the future.
Yeah. Mary, I have to say that this is the first time that I've participated in this hearing. I've been doing this now for 3 years. I know it doesn't sound like a long time, but trust me, it does feel like a long time. And I think this is the first time that I've had such an intimate experience with the building trades in this way, where it just gave me a whole new perspective. And so it's a shame that it took us 3 years to get, or at least for me to get this insight. But I'm glad that those who are tuning in were able to experience it, because I think that your testimonies and your stories and your will and your fight for equity really was demonstrated. So thank you. You have something.
I just wanted to say, you mentioned, it shouldn't have taken so long, but we're here now.
That's right.
And sometimes we get caught up on being the first, which is great, but more importantly, it's making sure you're not the last. And that's the job right there. And that's what I wanted to say. So thank you very much for this platform. I look forward to working with both of you and the whole council on how we could do things better around education and information to the people in our community about these great union opportunities which people don't realize exist, even if you have a record. So getting that word out there can help save some people. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Louisiana, you have any closing remarks?
Yeah. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Mary. Thank you to Nancy, Mia, Yasmani, Shaitan. Like, for real, because this work is incredibly important. It's where the rubber meets the road if we're really being intentional about racial equity, about the racial wealth gap. And it's never fun being the lonely only, right? I've been the lonely only as a Black attorney. And I know in many spaces, y'all are, like you said, Mia, the lonely only in senior leadership. And if we are going to be very intentional about BRJP and where we fall short, we all realize that every single one of us has a role in that solution. So I just thank you. I know personally from family members who have recently joined the unions that y'all are gang for each other, okay? And I need that, like, in ways that I was like, whoa, okay, did not know that it was that deep, but yeah. What did you say? Okay, listen, I'm not trying to get into the tribal wars now. No, that's not my capacity. I do not have that knowledge, but I will just say that, like, that's where the beauty can be, right? Where we do feel like the doors are open for all of us and where we can feel comfortable and proud fighting that economic justice fight alongside our union brothers and sisters and siblings, right? That we all feel included. So we all got work to do, and I appreciate the work that y'all do in your unions, that you do at Building Pathways. Consider me, as y'all know, an ally in this work to move it forward. We got work to do, and I am impatient, as I know a lot of you all are. So thank you. Thank you for your patience today I know this has been long, and I know this for a lot of y'all is your first hearing, so, but just thank you. And to those who observe, have a happy Easter weekend.
Thank you. And I'll just say, I haven't done the grapple yet. Y'all ain't done. We'll find out. I gotta do my closing. That's right. I got my 4 more hours left here. No, I also just wanted to thank you all for your patience and for being here. And you know, I know the only syndrome, because every space that I have walked into, I've had to fight to get into and stay in. Right? And so, and being disruptive in those spaces and unapologetic about it, right? So I applaud you for showing up the way that you did today and always everywhere that you are, because that's what this time requires. And yes, I am a critical friend, and I look forward to working with you all, however you all see fit. And know that for me, and this is what I said to Brian Doherty, and I'll say it publicly on the record here, is like, I'm more interested in your relationship than I am any other things, right? So for me, I just want to make sure that I can hold you accountable, especially around, not accountable, but like being friends with y'all. With all the early childhood education, when I worked at Goodwill, I had to reduce my hours so that I can be able to qualify for a voucher so that I can work. And so what we're talking about is removing barriers so that our workers can actually get to work. And so I'm really encouraged about our partnership and what else we need to do to continue to build better pathways for everybody. All right, and with that, hearing adjourned.